you still have those advantages, whether this other thing exists or not. But they have to understand the same exact same thing, like what we've been doing and learning, and so we can teach other people and get them involved with what's going on here. They have to their success rate is based off of participation as well. And in my point of view, like, since I understand that higher participation equals a higher success rate of the protocol, that when I put my money on the asset, like the protocol that provides the staking asset its value in the first place, or the thing that was built on top of it before the staking protocol that I'm a member of even had a chance to gain its own participation, that gives it its success rate in the very first place. You see what I'm saying? Like, one side of it, we have a very well understanding that Icosa protocols and the availability of what we're doing here and how they operate um, has a very high success rate, and we know how to actually work that machine, right? The feedback loop through the buyback function, through the auctions, like, and all those types of things. This is just how it works. And as a staker, you get rewarded for it, and you have to have some sort of inflation for the asset to garner in market makers that want to participate with the volume that's coming across the pairs, make it more interesting. And it would be very beneficial to make it even higher incentivizing for the market makers of Hex and Icosa themselves, right? Between the two pairs. Um, to to have this other thing that's being built on it is just, it's baffling to me, because we have to have a success rate on the asset, the protocol that provides the asset for staking rewards. Um, we have to give it its own participation results of being more damn successful. And to have this other thing built on it takes away from that success from the community members, unknowingly to them in their own damn participation, right? If they're participating in other things other than this protocol themselves and using it like individually on their own, um, then they're not helping for the success rate of the protocol that, like I said, gives the asset its value in the first place, to continue to keep participating with it, right? And then closing the loop and maybe potentially garnering more hex in the end result, right? Like, maybe, I don't know, becoming a liquidity provider and knowing that the share rate's going to jump up and that it's going to move across your pair. Well, you'll be able to cash out some of your liquidity at that time and have more hex than you ever really actually would have by selling it on market, and then utilizing that gain that you just made right there to recycle it back through the whole entire system. There's so many ways to stab at this thing, but you got to teach people how all this stuff works for them to actually go do a lot of it successfully. And they don't, there's no program on the world that you can have somebody that adds so much logic to a protocol that they have that can't be deemed successful. The only way that it can be deemed successful is if the community members that are already involved with these protocols decide that for some reason it would benefit them to redeem their availability of having all these options and just give it away over to this other protocol, right? And make it successful, make it a power in the cog of what we've got going on here, that will be able to make decisions on its own behalf, like they said, um, to move around in our ecosystem, which is going to cause for us to behave differently, as opposed to maybe, putting yourselves like in the potential situation where um, you could be the one as an individual that makes moves and it's beneficial for the whole entire community. Um, that doesn't actually have to be an extraction of value of some sort from the cog, right? Which would be the HSIs that are currently there. I get what they're doing. I get their reasoning for having this thing for poly. It helps out their other things that they already have deployed. Um, you have to have a longer attention span in this community to understand where the success rate is available to be. And previous to any events happening, I mean, it hasn't even been 90 fucking days, guys. You have to not have a short attention span deficit to understand, the role of the positions of the early people that are here, and giving that away early, losing your advantages that you currently have. Like, to me, it seems very simple how you would actually just respond and behave. But for some reason, I feel like I have to say something, at least, to at least appeal to the people who are understanding of the Icosa protocol and how to use it, and they understand it, and they see these advantages to how they would be able to continue to gain a higher pool position, and when there may be opportune times to take advantage of bonuses and things like this as well. Right. And then the thought process gets even deeper when you get into the people that are buying Wattses and getting involved with that type of participation as well. Right. No matter what happens, those guys will probably be in the position to hold the majority of the inflation anyway, regardless of whatever happens outside. Depending on certain Wattses that are there.
I think it was great. I think it was great that you brought them into the chat. I would really like to see them in here doing some creative brainstorming. Playing off ideas that you could throw to them. Because what I love about this chat is it seems to be a real hotbed for great creative ideas, as well as giving advice. So no, I think it was a positive move. I suppose the way that I look at it is that it's going to stress test Alex's system in a way, and I think Alex can actually learn a hell of a lot about his own protocol by the way the stress test performs. Because Alex is the sort of guy that this won't be his last project. I'm guessing that he will prepare something for Pulse Chain, and if he sees a flaw or he sees where this could be improved, surely that is actually a really good thing, because the next project he will make sure that vampire attacks, if you regard it as a vampire attack, I kind of see it. I suppose I see it in a slightly different way, and I've expressed that to you, Executioner, that it gives the opportunity for guys who don't have so much time as I would call them, the sort of chart nerds, and the ones who want to dig deep, and the ones who have got 4 screens. Some people have got very busy lives, and some people might want to get involved. So
there's very few people. I will tell you this: there's very few people that have this imaginary situation that you're talking about. You know what I mean? There's not, and then the fact that there are actually so few people that have the opportunity and the time, the availability, and those types of resources allotted to them. There's too many fucking HSIs in the thing for them to be able to do it without a team of people, right? So even they lose their advantage in their own capabilities, even if they had an advantage of all these other types of things available to them. Yeah, they might be able to pretend like they're 4 different people, but they're not able to pretend like they're 20. So there is a limit to that as well. And there's not even that many people that will be able to pretend like they're 4 different people at the same time, right? But there comes a point of your expenses that you use to try to gain advantage of something before you realize that you have a lot more work to do to make up for how much money that you spent to give yourself that advantage. And a smart person would calculate all that stuff before even getting involved in the first place, right? Like, how sucky would it have been to spend 10 grand on Zen, you know what I mean, with all the gas fees to make thousands of wallets and then watch everything that you would have made go down the tubes. Like, the only way that it would have been beneficial is if every single wallet you only minted for one day and then extracted value on that very first day and did all the work to go through all those wallets. That's it. That was the only real time that there was an actual thing to happen for that. So as far as like what we're dealing with here is just a matter of participation versus success. If Icosa doesn't succeed because we lose the incentive to participate with the auctions through the buyback function. Like if we lose that, then who gives a fuck about poly is what I'm saying. Who gives a flying shit about it if we lose the incentive for the bigger players to keep playing? We all lose. And that's not good. Not good at all. So something needs to be provided to fuck, the whole goddamn thing was set up so it would incentivize the things the way that it were in the very first place. You know, to say that there was an issue or a problem that we're coming in to save you guys because we noticed this thing was going to happen would make sense if there was a fucking problem. There's not. There's no problem here. None. None at all. And now I leave it up to you as community members that give a shit or not about the protocol and how it's supposed to operate should very much weigh how the success rate is calculated. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not your average Icosa community member, obviously, but I give a fuck about everybody that's participating. I really do. And I wouldn't say vampire attack or suggest things like this or whatever, but what's done is done, and it will be the more participation that it has, the more that I'm going to be like, see, I fucking told you later on in the road. As individual holders and stakers holding on to this mining equipment, maybe there'll be opportunities where I'll be able to tell you the reasons why you've lost an advantage for having the availability of participating with something so early before it's even had the opportunity to even have one single damn event happen in the first place. To actually reward the people for getting involved, maybe the people that even put in a fuck ton of HSIs in the first place, because they knew that there wasn't going to be like this relevant factor of a centralized thing coming in and actually taking the advantage away from the community members that were participating in the first fucking place. Get real. Yeah, I'm not exactly seeing how it actually makes any sense to me. It's going to happen anyway, though, whether I like it or not. So I have to respond kindly, at least begrudgingly, with the now new founded partnership where they're going to be involved with the community anyway, whether I like it or not. You know, and I can facilitate like lying to myself and go, well, it could be a good thing because at least that centralized entity that has all this sway and power to take away from me whenever they would like, you know, is owned by other community members. Like that doesn't really fix the problem, you know, and it's up for our own community to understand how it works or not, that they have the power to make this thing succeed or not, whether it's going to be actually taking from those HSIs and taking away from the capability of being able to keep burning more hedron faster and gain the advantage there too, and have two different assets that are just chugging along at any point in time. When the price changes, it's telling all of us to go buy Hex or to buy this other asset, like telling you what to do. As the inflation of Icosa happens, which it's about to happen, it would be very distressing to me to see a bunch of community members just giving away their access to all these options for the next 15 years to something that you can't say it's going to be proven. We haven't even went through one event yet, not one, where we're already garnering and trying to do everything in our power to educate our own community and telling them the reason why our own participation is going to garner the success rate as individuals. Just like Richard Hart would tell you, right? That having the available knowledge of getting out of centralized exchanges and being in DeFi to make these choices on your own would suggest that pooled type of entities isn't exactly the best type of thing for you to get into all of the damn time, not all of the damn time. Maybe on top of Hex, where it's had multiple years to garner the availability to get some sort of adoption where participation is a thing and it's been proven, and you don't have a lot of fuss and muss of who's getting in and how much money that they have. But there certainly wasn't anything being built on it to pool it in that type of way to extract value to this other thing that they created. Um, but yeah, I mean, the narrative doesn't change there, because even if there was a pool, right, then in that pool would suggest that they're going to take that asset and they're going to lock it up for as long as they possibly can, which is fine. That's perfectly fine. As far as building on top of Hex, I mean, they've had their adoption amplifier. They've seen a great run up. They got an awesome looking chart. I'm a Hexican too, so I was there through the whole entire thing to watch it all happen and see how they did it with nobody getting involved in it and like just giving it a chance, right? Like fighting scammers the whole time, yelling at people, hey, just give it a chance. And then meanwhile at 10,000 X's during that whole entire time, right? And then now we're talking about building on top of Icosa, and we didn't even give it a chance. Not even going to give it a chance. Already going to just try to somehow figure out how to get a bunch of the people who have the power to mint their own Icosa and give it to a centralized entity. Like, it just doesn't make any damn sense to me. And I think that people are going to do it too. I think they're just going to freely, willingly like give up their availability. They turned in HSIs. They spent time to be able to mint the Icosa through the staking protocols. They didn't even wait for not one event to happen to see the actual rewards being minted to them while staking, like, and go through a cycle at all to understand the value of what they're holding on to, even if they're staking Hedron, right? That just gives you the option. Buying Hedron and having Hedron just gives you an option to participate in the Icosa staking protocol, and you can use it as a fucking currency to be able to go in there and participate with the liquidations auctions. That's great, right? That Hedron is now just technically a currency for its own damn market should give everyone that's involved with Hedron more of a bullish sentiment that now you can have all these things to do with your Hedron other than just go sell it. Right? You can stake it, use it as a currency, you can speculate on it, you can trade it, you can do all sorts of crazy shit with it. You can borrow it off of an HSI and short the market if you want to. Not financial advice, by the way, that's risky, but you can. There's all sorts of shit that you can do with Hedron. Well, when it comes to Icosa, it's like, why not? If we all understand that the stakers participating in staking and minting up Icosa and using their staking protocol that they made the contract with themselves at these minimum terms to have access to this mining equipment that mines up this Icosa for these events to happen, is something that I think that we should consider more valuable as individuals than giving up the opportunity of what you could actually do with that Hedron. That's a hell of a lot more beneficial than this promise of some other thing that might be better for you in the end result. That's fine. If it is, great. But it requires the participation of the assets and the protocols from the communities in and of themselves to be successful before any of the other things that are being built on it should even be calculating in your mind as a smart thing to fucking get involved in. And I just say that like because I do care about the individual community members. If you were only in Icosa and you weren't in Hedron and you weren't in Hex and you were only in Icosa and you weren't in Maxi, how would you feel about all of this stuff? And that's the position that I take. When I go into the Hedron room and I'm talking about that, I will be talking about as a Hedronian and how I feel about certain things, which may have a different perspective. But I do that for the value of everybody, that you can take it for what it's worth, because I don't know what you guys have. I know who you are. I just don't know what you have, because we don't have those types of conversations. If you're into Maximus and you're involved with all the other stuff that they have, even their perpetuals, great. That's fine. I don't advertise against that. as a matter of fact. Um, I think all the stuff that they've built so far is great. The poly thing, I just happen to be in a particular position where I can speak on it as an Icosa community member and how I feel as an individual that everything is just about to start. And if you give away your opportunity to gain as much value as you possibly can from it by going into the next shiny object before the first one's even had a chance to shine, then you're part of the problem against the success ratio of the actual asset protocol that provides the asset its value in the first place. So hitting that ceiling and shit like this will have more value to you to buy it if there was a discounted value at all because of how much Icosa that you're getting. Because the longer that we go, the more opportunities that you guys have as early participants to build your own pool of a mining equipment that every day pays you at 000 UTC every day. But that does require the participation of the community members to incentivize the buyback and to use that to take advantage of arbitrage types of things. And with these guys, now, whether they succeed or not in being able to actually participate in the liquidations auctions to get what they want, there's going to be a certain amount of that hedron that's going into the staking protocols that are involved with Icosa community members as just individuals as Icosa community members. So now they're involved. Now they're in the tier, right? Like their whole premise is to save you from a problem that you may or may not have in the future. We don't know whether that's gas is going to actually be a problem that far into the future. But we can propose that that will be, since we have relevant data that suggests that it will be now, right? However, you can go with that narrative. That's fine, because then it gives you purpose to have more of a reason to provide incentive for people to be involved with that. I think they've done great so far with Maxi and their other stuff. Awesome. But when it comes to this, are you actually providing a solved issue for a problem that Icosa community members actually have to garner that participation from the Icosa community that has a fuck ton of hedron? Is it? What is the incentive other than them actually using their own individual availability to start now before any damn event has even happened under their own volition? Why, how dare anybody come in to give them an opportunity of options and try to take that away from them? Because people are going to do it and they're not going to realize what they're doing. And that's fine. They can go ahead and do it. It's fine. Like hedron will get burned in the result. Hedron and the inflation that they add by adding their hedron to the staking protocol isn't really like a term where you can be like, well, it's causing lack of sell pressure because it's not selling the Icosa because it's going to keep the stake for 15 years. Well, you're causing inflation that's just sitting there, getting bigger and bigger, bigger over 15 years that you're going to distribute after 15 years. That is the potentiality of an issue, right? So understanding that, you have to lay out and weigh out your options as to, now that they are community members, how would they even feel about maybe figuring out a way to incentivize the buyback function just as much, if not more, than the way that they have de-incentivized the community that's been involved with the whole thing, with the opportunity to be able to buy back an HSI after putting one in, to be able to start right away before the first 30-day minimum stake lengths came to a conclusion for people to get started right away. The day oneers were very, very, very well rewarded for turning in HSIs and staking and being involved to get that inflation. And they're even more excited that this event is even going to happen and inflation is going to occur again in this particular type of event. Losing value in these types of big events is losing, in my opinion, losing participation in the event in and of itself. Therefore, your success rate goes down. Your availability to reach higher percentages of success rate um, faster goes down. Right? They're not going to be involved the whole entire time. Right? It depends on how much gas that they have to be able to participate. Right? Which they've created another water thing to try to facilitate their longevity and being able to continue to buy HSIs from the little guy that's trying to participate. And that's against, you know, the Icosa and the Hedron community that understands about creating the HSIs, getting the Icosa, having the availability to go in there and participate against a monster centralized entity that wants to be able to get your Hedron from you, to use it against you, to outbid you with this big old gas tank that they have from donations that are coming into them through this water protocol that they have, to make sure that you as an individual don't have enough gas to be able to compete with them with this big old tank of gas that they have available to them, so they can buy all these smaller HSIs under the guise of saving you from a problem that you have, which we don't. Turning an HSI into the buyback function doesn't cost that much gas. We don't care to hold them throughout the fruition of the rest of the 15 years to worry about the gas costs later. And even if we were, some of us don't speculate that we're going to have those types of problems with those HSIs later. We may not 13 years down the road. We may not even have that problem in 6 years down the road from now. Now, what's the narrative for your existence when the problem doesn't exist anymore? How much value will these add-ons for that existence still have? Hopefully, it's going to be very dependent on the underlying asset, which is hex, and the other underlying asset, which is connected to it through code now, which is Hedron, and all the protocol availability to that. And Icosa is going to do the same thing because it's all connected through code. So great options for people. You guys have the options to do whatever you want. I don't suggest to tell anybody how to manage their money. But as a Icosa community member, I was already bullish at a certain amount of HSIs getting put into the function in the first place for the success rate of Icosa, and that was smashed out of the park by thousands of HSIs. So I do see it like as a small little bump in the road as far as how quickly the success rate can go, because I'm still bullish on the whole thing, regardless of the existence of this other thing. And we'll just have to move on from it. Hopefully we can get more organic data with less fuckery, I guess, less opportunity. I mean, why would you throw away the shiny object you just got, so, and all the excitement that you got from getting the Icosa like light bulb to go off in your head, how it all works and how to be able to gain these advantages, and then just go give it away to people who are just trying to figure it out? Like these guys just not weeks ago were trying to figure out how Icosa Hedron staking pools and Watsa and how all of it works, when some of you guys have been in here for months, already knew, already educated, already knew how all this stuff works. And you want to potentially give away your shiny object to this other shiny object before it's even had an opportunity to prove how shiny it can be. It just baffles me. But like I said, I digress slightly, because it's going to exist anyway, and people are going to participate. I mean, even if there was 100 participants in this room right now, there's literally thousands of people, 20,000 plus Hedron holders that you'd never be able to reach that perspective to, right? Of what you hold in your hands and how much you really want to get involved with the shiny syndrome of passing along the next thing. Go ahead, Impulsive. I saw that you had something to say.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I'm just hoping that kind of maybe what we saw with some of their last mints, that it was kind of seems like a diminishing return compared to how well they did with Maximus. I'm just hoping there's not as much participation as they're hoping for on this whole thing.
Yeah, me too. Because I think that we've like met to the better nature of our community that you don't need to have pooling stuff. That's not our problem, right? Like initially when Gold Key came in, he said, so this guy came in and made an HSI and he got a whole bunch of Icosa for it and he staked his Icosa. He staked it. Can you believe that? He fucking he got a bunch of it and he staked it and he diluted the pool. And it's like, okay, that he did what he was supposed to do. Like, what's the big deal here? Exactly. You just pointed out like what we all know we have the opportunity to do. But it's going to dilute you guys. I said, well, it's going to create competition with the rest of us community members to maybe possibly add to our stakes when it comes to what we do with our yield in the end of it, just like it would suggest us to do anyway, right? So we can keep minting higher values of the damn token when inflation happens. Right now, we're at a static inflation level and people are already happy. Imagine what happens when any of these events happen in the first place. Like it's going to be fantastic for the individual at that time under minimum staking lengths that aren't 15 years, right? That's how this game is supposed to be played, to bring in and add different rules and different dynamics to the game, and then trying to throw away your options before the events and the games have even started to play after we've been telling you about the game theory and how to play the fucking game the whole time. Like to even have these conversations is just kind of really silly to me when it's like, I can crush your availability of having participation in this other thing by just telling people how awesome Icosa and Hedron and the hex ecosystem in that respect, just those three are so much more incentivizing just for the individual. And the gas thing's been fixed when it comes to the Icosa protocol anyway. There's no more extra added cost for holding it for 5 years, keeping your staking length and adding to your stake. Maybe dollar cost averaging your Hedron from your Hedron staking pool to turn it into Icosa to increase your value in the Icosa pool when the inflation starts to get higher and more people start to come in, giving you an already heads up advantage by just holding onto your Hedron in the first place under your own regards for what you can do with it. Like maybe even maybe actually consider this. You're not as smart as you think you are. And then later on you will be, and you will wish that you had what you could have done all these other things with in your hands rather than giving it away before understanding what the first shiny object that gave you the protocol in the first place to do all the cool shit with, you just gave that away to somebody else. Like, just blows my mind. Like, so
I instigated the truth to come out. Thank you, Executioner. I appreciate, as we all do, your very detailed and wonderful perspective on all the nuances and how they relate to the truth.
I just am one of you guys, right? And who better? I don't just okay. So sometimes, okay, I'll put this in an easier perspective on like a one-on-one understanding. So if I'm like go to work every day and there's a friend of mine or somebody that I just work with, but if we didn't work together, we wouldn't be friends, but I like them enough to listen, right? And they come to me with this problem and they complain and they complain and they complain. And it's something I haven't heard them say before. Then I'll just be real quiet and I'll listen to what they have to say. And I'll leave it at that because I'm just going to understand that it's probably just venting and they're not looking for me to fix their fucking world that seems to be quite broken at the time, but that's not what they're looking for. But then tomorrow when I come to work, the guy is like saying the same thing over again. The same situation. Like I didn't hear him yesterday. And so now I see it as a cry for help. Now maybe they are looking for more than just a shoulder to bitch at, right? So then I might actually like garner a little bit more of my attention to like toss an outside perspective, right? Like maybe your mindset isn't exactly what you should have, or maybe there's a finer lining to this or da 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 or whatever the fuck, right? And then the next day is kind of like the turning point on whether I continue to participate. Right after that, after it's gotten to that point, do they just want attention? Because now the third day, instead of like taking heed to anything, and like they just come back at me the third day and have the same complaint, right? And bitch fit about whatever. Not coming back and going, yeah, I tried this and I tried that, or it was important enough for me to like try to figure it out on my own. And whatever you said, like gave me the opportunity to do this on my own. And I appreciate that. But no, it didn't work in the end result. Now I have this other thing. And then I just leave it at that, right? Another situation, fine. You want to figure it out on your own? Great. That's awesome. But then the next day, they have the same bitch fit. Like they're not trying to work on it. Well, here's another thing you could try to do. And that's fine. Like we can go down this fucking road for quite a while doing that type of shit. That's fine. But as soon as I realize that you're just wanting attention in that respect, then I probably wouldn't garner any more of my attention to it to help in the situation. So as a community member, I am public in my speaking a lot, you guys know, and I get individual messages. It's funny, like not all the time does somebody like actually speak up in the voice chat or actually in the public chat, like actually make a comment, directed with me on something that might have been said. But in the DMs would suggest that a lot of you do have the same mentality, right? So, and the mentality is like worry about this poly thing and having it centralized ownership of these things, to where, I have to realize that, okay, well, a large portion of the community does feel this particular way. So it will allow for me to at least make a public stance as an Icosa member. And this is like the way that we kind of feel, and not have to be like Hexecutioner makes the calls for what people do around here type shit. And I would not want to get it twisted like that was the case, right? And I think that we all managed it pretty well when those guys came in, like the general understanding of what's going on here. They based pretty much everything that they had to say of their success of their project that they're trying to do is based off of participation. Where the only rebuttal that I have to that is same as us, buddy, same as us over here, right? So if you're going to participate, at least incentivize us, the community, to participate. Because right now they're not. It's not incentivizing any of us to actually participate in any other way other than if you're lazy, you can go do this and lose your ability to do anything with those assets for the next 15 fucking years. So
I see their whole thing is just dilute myself. That's all I look at as, really.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm not going to talk shit about anybody. I'm just going to speak very realistically as an Icosa community member who has a lot of Icosa community members coming to me, speaking their opinions about how they feel about certain things. And then me putting my own little, this is how I would speak publicly thing about it. And then this is what I would personally feel and what I'm going to do. I'm not going to participate in it. Because I do see it as a direct competitor to me as an individual, right? Like we all started with nothing, right? We started when this project had 0 tokens, no inflation, none at all. We haven't even gone through any of the fucking events. So yeah, and then the bigger events for like the Watsa pool and stuff like that happen at the end of the year, when the whales decide to make their decisions on whether they're going to end their stake and what they're going to do with all their stuff getting involved in other pools and shit like this. So like there is a certain amount of data that I can take a little bit from the actions of the people that have been doing stuff like on the Watsa pool. Because like I said, we've had 0 events. There's actually 2 events that incentivize the Watsa pools, is that the auctions happening and burning Hedron and increasing their yield just by that individual event. And then when these first 5%ers come to their end of their first 90 days, are going to have the availability of ending their stake and moving over into the Icosa pool with their yield and increasing that that money printing machine, that minting mining tool during these high inflation points, which that's a huge incentive to do that. If you ask me, how many points are you going to gain on your money printer for your Icosa staking versus unstaking, re-compounding in the other pool, and then restaking and losing some points on your Hedron staking pool, right? Like, is it going to be worth it for a lot of people? Fuck yeah. Yes, it is. It's going to be. And it's going to pay out the Icosa staking, the Hedron, excuse me, the fucking Watsa pool with those bonuses when they end their stakes. And you see Watts is being burned previous to any of those events happening as well. So, I mean, like I said, you could put out as much knowledge as possible to the people that are holding the shiniest of the potential objects that they could ever possibly hold. And for some reason, they still just let it slip through their fucking fingers. And it's sad. And I don't want to see that happen, right? I'm not going to manage the success rate versus this other protocol in any other way.
I feel like there are certain individuals, and I've come across these types of individuals in my life, that are extremely confident, but overly confident. And I tend to see those types of people be leaders to a type of leader to certain individuals that get swayed by such confidence alone. And it's, yeah, and I see that the similarity here with what they're doing. That's just my own take, like from a psychological personality kind of thing. That's like a relation to kind of just how the dynamic of all the psychology that's been going on through all of this. Figured I'd share that.
I mean, it's like this. You can do this with anything. Go to a group of people that invest in a certain thing and be like, hey guys, why don't you, instead of doing what you already do anyway, do it, give all your stuff to me, and I'll do exactly the same thing you're doing. And then I'll pay you at the end of it, of when I'm done with your assets. It sounds like a bank. What a bank does.
It's like holding back information, in a sense, because there's not education, and instead there's just trust me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, whatever happens, I mean, it has to provide a solution to a potential problem that actually exists. To perpetuate that there is a problem where one does not exist,
that's true. That's a good point.
Is just ridiculous to me in the first place, to garner this participation, which will be the only thing that garners you success, is actual availability to successfully trick people into participating. That's it.
Gas problems. Thank you very much.
Right.
Gas problems that they plan on creating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they're the ones who are saying that they're going to go in with this big bag and bid the things up, I mean, otherwise it was going to be organic between our community, whatever gas prices happen. But I mean, I don't like the mentality of coming and crushing the little guy, but then trying to say you're helping the little guy save gas. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's exactly what big time lobbyist groups do to other countries, like Red Cross, right? Or the Clinton Foundation. Like some poor island goes through a hurricane and there's devastation and destruction, and they show up with money and pillows and clothing and wood and say that they're going to help build this whole thing. But the whole time, what they didn't realize is that entity had already scoped out a particular part of the land that those people have, which had a bunch of resources on it, and then moved in the Red Cross tents at the time and turned them into buildings. And then those buildings eventually had fences that went up with barbed wire put around them. And then mining equipment got brought in, and they started extracting the resources and said that they weren't going to fucking leave. Right? Under the guise of help, under the guise of security, and we're going to be there to assist and help you, turned into this leech. It could not
Similar
be.
It's similar to the oldest trick in the book, which is from an entrepreneur standpoint, which I am. The oldest trick in the book is I have money and I want to share some with you.
Right. It's a Trojan horse of sorts. I mean, if we had a problem, now understand this, guys. If there was an actual problem here in the Icosa community, as far as gas fees for hex stakes are concerned, then I don't see it. There isn't one. Not for this community. There's not. And those HSIs require for the success rate of this community to continue to have participation with the auctions and burning hedron. Therefore, there comes in our hedron community, which is going to also participate in the Icosa community and have this symbiotic relationship without any leeches on it. And if we allow for the participation of leeches to happen, then you just hand over your assets over to them. While the
They
rest
were
of us,
effective at making me very much more competitive than I normally would have been going into these auctions. That's basically the good that I personally have gotten from this. Got it
I
turned into a
bought
positive
I bought
somehow.
more ETH, that's for sure. I definitely stocked up on some more gas.
yeah, dude. Yeah, like I said, they're going to become direct competition, right? But I mean, we all still have to value and understand that the expansion of the community and having more people coming in and staking is going to provide for a I guess a more tough road for us, because now we're adding more competition to our own success, right? However, being earlier and being in prior to any of these events, when these events occur, however many more events that you can get in previous to your onboarding tactics, gives you a percentage of an advantage versus the people that you decide to onboard whenever you decide to do that. That's why I made like a sarcastic comment like, well, boys, you know, the bonus events are about to start happening. They happen like this over 365 days. They overlap each other in this certain types of event. I put it in the chat earlier for everyone to see how they happen. Um, and then after that, we can start onboarding. Right?
Exactly.
So give ourselves, the ones who are early enough, which we will call them, I call you guys investors for a reason, right? Because you guys are gaining pool ownership right now when these events are about to happen, and the events that are the inflation that are getting paid directly to you for your participation early in the protocol that has high value and success for longevity based off of the underlying asset, which is Hex, gives you something holding in your hands, something that is extremely valuable, probably one of the most expensive pieces of mining equipment that you will ever be able to purchase, right? And as the share rate moves forward, the other people that get in are going to really have to understand what they're getting involved into when they're doing it. And we have intentions to be able to give them the tools that they need to be able to build that mining equipment bigger than anybody else, just like we would, just like we should. On our way in as an investment tool, we should use these things as tools to build our positions to be what we can see in the data as Icosa exists for longer and longer periods of time. I would suggest maybe we wait for the 365 days of the seeded liquidity and all of the bonus phases that'll happen, right? There'll be 5% bonuses that come to a potential end of 90-day end minimums where somebody will be able to compound their yield from the Hedron staking pool and Icosa staking pool 4 different times throughout the year, which will mint up additional bonuses to the Watson pool, but that doesn't matter. It gives you the opportunity to build this other thing 4 different times through just having that 5% bonus. And then the 10% bonus lands twice. And then so there's another 10% bonus and another 5% bonus that lands 180 days later, right? the potential for people to in their stakes and build their mining equipment even bigger at those particular times. Um, and then 3/4 of the way down happens to be another 15% bonus and another 5% bonus at that particular time for when people are going to end their minimums on their stakes. And then finally, after 360 days, there's going to be another event where another 5% ends, a 10% ends for the 180-day stakers that are doing it again, and then the 20% bonus that'll end at those times for people to do with whatever they want to do with their yield after the year has happened. And after all of those events have happened, you're going to have multiple inflation events where the stakers that are currently staked in their current positions, previous to doing anything with, let's say, poly or anything else that comes on, has the biggest advantage of absorbing the largest amount of inflation that this asset will ever have. And to get rid of it is dumb. To get rid of your opportunity to have the control after 360 days like it was designed is dumb. To lose all the options for 15 years of available things that can come along the road that has people with different intentions to build other things, and you may have lost out on that availability by participating in this other thing before having the generalized understanding and education of the asset that is the original one in the first place, which would be the Icosa protocol in the very first place. And that's the stance that I think that I'm going to have to take on it, and understand that people are still going to participate with poly anyway. So I'm just going to have to deal with the fact that they're going to be involved in the community. So might as well bank on the fact that maybe they can build something that pools in another way that's going to convince other people to get involved that benefits the buyback function. Right. So that's like full circle the way that I feel about it, the way that I think that I'm going to have my stance on it, and still just keep continuing to tout that the strongest person is the individual with the most knowledge.
All I know is it didn't change any of my plans or my thoughts on the system. Where just listening to you, Executioner, and the rest of the guys in this room, since February, and getting a game plan on what I want to do with all this. I mean, the only thing it changed in my plan is how much gas I want in my wallet before the auctions. But besides that, I'm sticking to my game plan. I've got my stakes, and yeah, I mean the system's beautiful. It's something that I love, man. And it's kind of, I missed out on Hex and the big runs and everything on it. And, being in day one on this system and just being a part of it from the beginning and watching it grow and what it's turned into, like, it's perfect how it is. And sometimes things are just better left alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't create a problem where problems don't exist.
Have enough problems to work on, enough things that other things that need worked on around the community, and all kinds of other stuff that you could think of. Where this system's, Alex did a good job, man. He's a smart guy, and he thought all this stuff out. It wasn't just thrown together the week before a launch or something, or before some big event.
Yeah, the timelines for the minimum staking lengths even have a purpose, as you notice that they like fall in line together for like
And these are all things that I didn't know. Obviously, just get the Hedron, but looking at how all these pieces and how everything fits together and all this stuff, I mean, it was very well thought out.
I'd have to agree. Sorry, I guess I'm a fucking Icosa maxi to the nth degree. I really am. So I apologize, guys, for exposing you to such toxicity of we are the champions. Good luck.
So you like Maxi?
No, I mean not maxi.
No,
I mean
I'm just kidding because you
I
said you're Maxi.
I don't have a problem with maxi or their derivatives at all. I do have a certain obvious opinion about poly, because I
Yeah,
would rather
I was
participation
just
for.
kidding because you
Yeah,
said you were Maxi.
yeah, I know. What other word am I supposed to use to
I don't
describe
know.
behavior? I'm a Icosa maximalist.
Yeah, there you go.
There, smart ass.
Yeah,
I
I think
heard I heard your girlfriend talking to me earlier. I know she was just talking to me specifically.
Well, yeah, I was like, say something, and she's like, no, I'm embarrassed, and her English isn't that good, and then she said goodbye, and I was like, say goodbye, and she was like, okay, and then she said adios. I was like, wow, you can't even say goodbye in English.
It's okay. Luckily, we're very simple beings, and we understand adios at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. I figured that you were with her, so that's good for you, man.
Yeah, I'm with her. I'm staying in her apartment and her roommate, and for like $400 a month and it's not too small.
So it's Brazil, right? Is that right?
Colombia.
Oh, Colombia, thank God, because Brazil's the one that's going through the turmoil right now, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. I mean, not good. That's not good. But I meant the first
And
thing
for
that
me,
I forgot that it was Colombia, and I was like, oh shit, I better say something, ask something about it, make sure that everything's all good. But okay, thank God it's them and not you. Sorry.
yeah. So they elected a literal communist in Colombia like 2 months ago, but like it's kind of weird. Like I'm like not that against it because the president before him had been in power literally since like 1991. So maybe a little change wouldn't be bad.
Is that the sentiment of the people, or I mean, just the people in Colombia feel that way?
I think my girlfriend voted for the communist, but her family I think voted for the same guy. But it's not like America where if your best friend or your family member votes for Biden or Trump, you excommunicate them. It's like they're still super close. They have like family dinner and they still talk every day.
So, like, Colombians vote in Brazilian elections?
No, I don't think so. It's like it's its own country, but um, yeah, like they speak Portuguese in Brazil, and they speak Spanish here.
I see.
But actually, on that note, the Venezuelan flag, the Ecuadorian flag, I think, and the Colombian flag are all almost the same because they all used to be the same country, and then they split into three.
No shit. So, yeah, things probably operate a hell of a lot differently than I would have any understanding of. Their nation dichotomy and their voting structures are probably completely different than the way I would understand them.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems pretty. It seems pretty normal here, but I just like they're just better. They're just higher quality people. I think. Like I don't like. I got my brother gave me a ride to the airport, and he couldn't stop ranting about how Elon Musk bought Twitter and he's gonna kill the company. And I'm like, I like Elon Musk. I didn't say this, but I like Elon Musk. I think he's gonna win. You just want to talk shit, and we almost never hang out. And this is what we're talking about. Like,
Uh,
yeah, I don't know. Like that's I yeah. Just I feel like they care. They're a lot more about relationships here.
that's good. We're all about uh, divide and conquer in the United States right now.
Yeah,
Divide ourselves and conquer ourselves, like poison
yeah.
our own water supply. Like, okay. I don't know. I've heard like you don't like there's you know Robert Kiyosaki. You don't want to be listening to his podcasts. I heard about 5 minutes of one earlier this morning, and it was all America's coming to an end talk. It's like, oh no, oh no. Like he's getting so old, now. So it's just kind of like,
Yeah, he's
you know,
like I agree. I'm like I agree with you, but I don't want to talk about it. Like
right.
I just want to like.
Well, I mean,
I
how
mean,
many other,
that's what I would talk to him about. Like, that's what I would say to him.
well, how many other times has it been the same scenario, doom and gloom, and it's going to be horrible and everything, da 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 da. It's just the only thing that's different now is that there's a lot of heightened stuff that's going on in the world through some war that's happening between other countries.
I think. Well, I'm gonna give you my little. It's different this time, like I always do. Um, when the printing press came out in like the 1700s or 1600s, like every European country had a revolution. Like 100 years later. Um, First it was like French Revolution, and then the American Revolution, and then I don't know, just like all of Europe. Um, but I think social media might do the same thing, except it's gonna happen. It seems to be happening faster than the printing press did because text is really slow. So I think there will be a lot of revolutions. Doesn't That doesn't mean like there's gonna be the end of the world, but it just mean like that. Um, yeah, like Richard Hart says, we need digital rights. Like that's probably gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, because like during those revolutions, it was censorship of literature, right?
Yeah, like the only literate people were in the church, and then they came out with newspapers, and actually, if you think about it, like not Beethoven, sorry, Benjamin Franklin, um, was he had his own news. And I think a lot of fathers had their own newspapers. And if you really think about it, that was like being a social media influencer back then, was having your own newspaper.
Absolutely. It gave you complete control of speaking to the masses with your voice.
Yeah, and so I think that motivated a lot of the peasants or whatever to learn how to read and write. And actually, I think that might be when it became probably when it became um, I'm guessing commonplace in the 1700s for them to teach you how to read and write in public schools. Um, like yeah, there was like yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like to further like the understanding that that's probably happening again would be like the acknowledgement that they no longer teach cursive and that like
Yeah.
the Declaration of Independence is written in cursive.
Uh, yeah, they probably can't even read that. That might be
You're
one
gonna
of the
have
problems.
well, you're gonna have a generation of people that are gonna grow up eventually, of these younger kids that will not be able to the masses of them will not be able to read the Declaration of Independence, even if it was changed.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like the understanding of just that is shocking in the understanding that they can just through the generations of people that can read a certain way of them dying off and the new generation not even having the capability of understanding or reading it, they can just change it and
Um.
they could okay, so you come across it, you go to Egypt and you see a bunch of walls and one person's like, I broke the code because I'm so smart, and then
Yeah.
like they say all this bullshit and then everyone believes that the wall says this, and that could like be a perpetuated telephone game that doesn't we all have done the telephone game when we were in school and saw how well that shit works, like it doesn't work very well anyway, right?
Yeah. I know that when I'm watching, so I I'm like a B1, B2 level in Spanish, and I watch like translated, or I watch movies with my girlfriend in English, but she reads the subtitles, and then I watch Spanish movies with her, and I read the subtitles, and I can tell that the subtitles are not the best translation. Like some of it doesn't make any sense at all. And actually, Narcos, if you watch Narcos in English, like you're missing like half of the stuff they say doesn't translate at all. Like, I mean, it translates, but they did a really bad job translating it. Um, so yeah, I'm like 100% sure that something that was written 2,000 years ago is probably not translated very well.
No, no, that's why, like, you know, speaking the word from a book under anybody's else's description could very easily sway what it actually means because of, I mean, have you read a book from like the 1500s and how they articulate their words in like sometimes you have to read a one paragraph like 10 fucking times to actually wrap your head around the understanding of the nuances of the verbiage and how they use it in literature back then. It was almost like reading a lawyer, like a lawyer's document, almost.
Yeah, I
You
know that
dance
if
now.
you go ahead. I know that if you read Hamlet or any of Shakespeare's stuff, and if you read it in an old English accent, that it actually like rhymes, and it has like a rhythm to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, because those things were made to be expressed through their range of entertainment through plays and the rest of that stuff too. So it does make sense. Um, but just the way people spoke, depending on their classification of person, right, in the community that they were in, they would speak differently, right? Like as if their nose was literally up in the air as they spoke sometimes. Um, I don't know. It's funny how you can establish terms when you speak to people and use verbiage and use it in a way that actually resonates inside that person because it's relevant to them as an individual. Uh, Usually, religion is something that people, I mean, it's best to stay away from that type of talk with a group of people, like religion and government talk, and finance is usually like the things that people should stay away from in conversation. But it's a good way to get a good understanding on how you can garner the attention of people to get them to listen, which I think is maybe something else that needs to be taught in groups of people. So that way, when you do go to, like, I don't know, expand the community for something that you believe in, you can go in there like the best person for the job because you actually do believe in what you're talking about, right? Um, you've put yourself in such a good position to have the advantages of knowledge of knowing what's happening or what's about to happen ahead of time, that having those types of conversations with people that are completely unknowledgeable at all and have zero exposure to cryptocurrency, it allows for you to speak to them in a way that it it garners their attention, at least, and that's the most important part. Hex was easy because you had a chart that you can just go look at, and people are like, "Oh shit," you can kind of lean against the FOMO, and people will just be ready to go for that. Um, which is fine. I mean, you're not really you can't really feel bad for onboarding people into a good asset anyway, in my opinion, right? Uh, Most good investors with a lot of money understand that you need to have time and longevity with something, to create a higher success rate, and the amount of participation through the longevity of the project or protocol or product, is going to garner those rewards to those people who, did take it very seriously and did do what it takes to at least participate, right? Not just in the protocol, but I mean in the community too. Like do whatever it is that you can to at least speak to somebody, bring them in the fold, and try to get them to wrap their head around it. Get them to come in here and ask what some may consider silly questions and end up with a profound understanding of how it all actually works in the end result. That'd be kind of neat, right? Go backwards here. Let's get people into Icosa and then we can teach them about the rest of it afterwards, right? Because the rewards from being involved in the protocol is pretty fucking good, in my opinion. Like just in the Icosa staking protocol is pretty good. So if you can just get people started, like what I would do, then when the bull run happens, like you're gonna have your own little church of people, right? That are like, holy shit, right? They didn't take everything they had and threw the whole kitchen fucking sink at it, of course, because we're smarter than to allow people to do those types of things when we onboard them. Have some sort of responsible sensibility to when you're doing these types of things, at least, right? And then put them in the position to be able to shave off whatever that they would have that they'd normally go spend on lottery tickets or, you know, teach them what a better diet is so that way they could spend less money on their food, right? Or teach them how to garden or some shit. And I'm talking about like family members. Don't go this far into like some rando that you come across the fucking street with, but set up the people that you love and the people that you care about, at least in positions to be more knowledgeable for something that's going to happen anyway. Everyone's going to be ushered into an age of digital finance and understanding of how to manage those types of things and be unfortunately probably watched and monitored at every turn, but you're going to have to deal with something like that anyway, where they're going to try to take away paper money and the availability of using that shit. Even your drug dealer is going to have to figure out how to get Venmo'd, right? So there's going to be a lot of gifts getting handed out, I would assume, up to 10 grand per year, unless that changes, of course.
Wait, you mean like universal basic income?
Yeah, just like universal basic income. I think that, you know, to think that it would just be established worldwide and that would be the one would be kind of a really basic approach to it. I don't think that that would be the case. I think that there's already other countries that are setting themselves up to have a digital footprint for that type of ecosystem, and they're currently building foundation to be able to support that type of ecosystem. And that is China, the Asian countries are already building in this type of direction, which is forcing the United States to have to do it too. It's just China can do it a lot easier because whatever they say goes, their people have to do it, and they have a lot of people to be able to make it happen. They have a lot of participation. You know, I've been harping all night about participation equals success, and they have a bunch of people who don't have a choice, so they get a lot of participation. They get to cheat in some sort of way. We actually have to do the work and get people to actually understand what's going on so they have the advantages to themselves instead of just this cheat code. You participate because I fucking told you to type shit. But I mean, as the bull market does come, which it will happen slowly, right? I believe it will. It's going to happen over many years, though. I think we got like 5 years of bullshit that we're going to have to deal with. And then maybe a potential success rate higher than that, higher than what we've ever currently had, as soon as it all gets figured out, right?
Are you talking about higher success, like the bull market's gonna start in a few years, or what?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think there'd be less of a bearish sentiment because there's only so much that you could beat the hell out of the horse, right? Eventually it turns into glue, right? And eventually you have to do something with the glue. So you do, right? And then sentiment changes in a certain respect anyway, whether you like it or not. Like those bottoms will happen and production will still be happening. Even if there's jobs of life, there's still something, but there's still cogs in the wheel that are sort of turning that'll make the whole thing still work in a certain respect. But if they take the whole thing and flip it on its head and turn it to a digital type of currency type of thing, then there may be potential to work the economies differently than how they currently have, where they can put themselves back in the advantage again, and then we can just keep chugging along for another 150 years, or maybe just another 100 years, or maybe longer than that. I think it all depends. But if everyone's put in a position where they have to participate anyway, like I'm saying that China is currently doing, then the success rate goes up at least, right? I guess there's like that. And the fact that we're already participating in digital environments and like knowing where our footprints should be and where they shouldn't be and how to like put ourselves around, it puts us in a huge advantage versus all the people that are going to get forced into it anyway. Like we've made the choice. We're already here. We're already dealing with it and doing it and like managing it the way that we already see ways to have advantages of doing these types of things. And then there's going to be a bunch of people that get forced into it. They're probably going to fight it. They're probably not going to want to do it. They're going to fall behind, and they're not going to be a part of the new group that will, because they're going to understand it better. They'll have the capability of understanding it, and they'll garner enough people that don't fall behind that the success rate is going to be a hell of a lot higher. And then the entities that currently control the stock market and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the other assets now, when they decide to move those things around, they'll be able to take advantage in this ecosystem when they've garnered control and have legislation and regulation that's beneficial to actually get financial advisors involved in some sort of way with legalities attached to
What
it.
do you mean success rate? Success rate of what?
Of crypto and money and everything that they're currently doing
So
to
like
keep it.
the success rate of new tokens.
Well, the success rate of new tokens would probably be very, very like based on the success rate of money, period. If money doesn't have a longevity to whatever they turn to or to whatever they're doing now, that incentivizes more confidence in the markets, then everything will come crashing down to zero, and they'll have to figure something out. So it's either that too. They'll have to figure something out soon on what to do, and it'll have to be something. They could even be something that's observed by the United States that another country is currently doing, and then figuring out how to wrap their heads around doing it with a bunch of people that can't be controlled the way that the other countries have their control over their people.
It's interesting. I read a book called like Money, where goes through the history of banking, like the first fractional reserve bank, and I think actually like you could look back at that as like analogous to right now, where that that was the first time that um a bank could be a private thing. Like you could start your own bank. Um, and yeah, like the first guy had a hell of a time, like getting the royalty to go along with it, and it took probably like 100, 200 years for them to finally have a central bank. Um, and then I don't know.
Eventually, you got to keep passing the money around and fagazing shit around all over the place, and then it doesn't work anymore, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's actually the trend of the book, is that every single fractional reserve bank has failed over the last 400 years, and we've been doing it for 400 years.
well, I mean, so eventually the chicken's got to come home to roost, right? Like, eventually your dollars aren't going to mean shit to the place that's doing all the manufacturing for all the stuff that you have in your house to have a comfortable life. Like the manufacturing capital of the world that makes the refrigerators, the TVs, the computers, the computer chips, the cars, the everything. The only thing that they would have an interest in is maybe the fact that you have stuff under the ground that you live on that would be a valuable resource to them to continue to keep manufacturing more shit. Like all the oil that the United States currently has underneath it, and other valuable resources that they have underneath it.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this, but I don't think that the government can. Yeah, maybe I've said it before in passing, that I don't think the government can create a competing currency, because that's why we're creating competing currencies, is because they can't fucking do it.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be privatized. It has to be like us. that make the bank, not
You
the
you
government.
can't trust them not to fractionally reserve it or start inflating the money supply.
Right. I agree. So I mean, having cryptocurrency where we the people can go in and make our own mining equipment to mint up these assets that it depends on the participation level, have a value to it just based off of the protocol itself and the value that it has, that it'll mint you up these tokens because you actually started the protocol that turned it into a piece of mining equipment, may potentially have some value, just like the Fed has a lot of value in their capability of minting up new dollars whenever the hell they want, where they don't even need the literal sense of a minting press to make the dollars. They can just add zeros to other banks' accounts to put it on their ledger. And that's
Yeah,
it.
so I
Digitally.
think that there's two like really hard stops that the Federal Reserve is going to have a problem with. Like they could raise interest rates to 20%, and but they still wouldn't be able to compete with Bitcoin because they're going to be inflating the money supply by I don't know, maybe 20%. I don't know, a lot, because that won't stop people from getting loans. They'll still buy treasuries. That would totally kill the banks. Like maybe that's even a stop before that. The banks would probably die at that interest rate. And then the other stop is that, oh, what was it? Oh, the national debt. They have to have some inflation in order to inflate the debt away. Otherwise, the payments on the interest will just overtake the entire budget and the whole thing just blows up. Or they'd have to default on, I guess they could default on themselves or on China or something.
Yeah, they could give away property that's owned by the United States government, and the United States government at any time can come to you as a citizen and then try to claim ownership as your property is theirs.
Yeah, that's that. And I mean, honestly, if you know,
I'm just speaking
if
in the
it comes to
reality.
that,
I'm not saying that it will. That's not what I'm here for. I don't do that type of shit. I'm just speaking to the reality that this does happen and it can happen. Not to say that it will happen, but if the United States gets in so much debt that it starts defaulting on things, and here's the problem, is we all know that the issue is that the majority of everybody doesn't have a savings account of even $1,000. 50% of the whole United States doesn't even have $1,000. So if something were to happen, they don't have any way of having some sort of soft safety net to help them. They have to rely on somebody else to do that for them. And what was the other point? Other than people not having money at all. Uh, Fuck, I had a brain fart. Sorry. Anyway,
well, I was gonna say, before we change the subject, that the if it came to that, I wouldn't be like it wouldn't be that bad of a thing, because what that means is that we've reached full adoption, basically, because then that means that the government suddenly has an interest in cryptocurrency succeeding, because it's going to be part of their balance sheet.
yeah, exactly. That's why I was thinking that, they're in cahoots with each other, these big giant companies in the fiat legacy world, right? That do all the trading across the foreign exchange. Um, they're the ones that afford a lot of the lobbyist group that actually do the speaking to the senators and the representatives of the states in the first place, to have a mouthpiece to say what they want them to say and to write legislation and regulation the way that they would want it to be written. And if that money being the big giant entities that are in the foreign exchange, to come in here, they need to make sure that the United States government isn't putting their fingers in and making certain things that are going to actually get in the way of them being able to make money off of what's going on over here. So I do agree with you with the adoption thing. It's going to cause like a huge influx of adoption. It'll probably be like the highest rise of liquidity and the assets that you're currently holding on in value that you've ever seen in your whole entire fucking life, for them to be able to sustain what they're trying to do. Which they have more money than certain, like multiple countries' GDPs put together, just as entities alone in this legacy finance, that want to come in and be able to dominate the availability, to manipulate the supply dynamics and the liquidity values in the stock markets worldwide, and the values of the dollars of the products that they have worldwide in those countries, and to come into cryptocurrency and realize that they could utilize that value to help them to leverage themselves up in certain ways, to continue to manipulate the markets that they're already in, to continue to further monopolize certain individual companies that they want to thrive, that helps them and their initiatives out in the end result, is exactly what they'll do. And I think that it'll take about 5 years or maybe more of recruitment for them to be able to make sure that what they know, there's money there and they don't want to fuck it up. So they want to make sure that they can garner. It's easier to do this, to place the Trojan horse and act like there's a problem where it really isn't at, create a problem so that way it seems valid, and then come in as the hero, saving everybody in the end result, right? Call it Coinbase, right? Is the hero in the end result, right? But what we don't know is now Coinbase is now owned by the CIA and controlled by the financial arm of the Federal Reserve, which is BlackRock, and nobody is any wiser by it at all. And of course, the largest financier of the stock market and owner of everything on the planet is definitely going to have a high incentive to make sure that they already tried to kill cryptocurrency, and now they realize that it can't. They see the wealth that's happening, and when they look at market cap, they are not like taking it the way that we see it as a vanity metric. They are not, especially since they have a protocol called Aladdin that makes a lot of the decisions for them to be able to make good market decisions on what they're going to get into. And then they wrap their heads around their genius on the reasons why the protocol decided that this was a better thing for them to be doing. And so now Aladdin has gained interest in crypto now after trying to kill it, and it itself couldn't do it. When you can't beat them, join them. And they see a lot of fucking money, and they don't want the United States to get in their fucking way. And they already are.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you get my drift on that, right? They don't. If the United States comes in and pokes around, and then all of a sudden Coinbase comes to the rescue, like no, that might be a front, right?
Yeah,
like the superhero that saves cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it's a theater.
Is a centralized entity in and of itself.
What do you think about crypto.com? Are they compromised or whatever?
Well, if not, they will be.
Yeah.
Right. Like they put themselves, anybody that has any of those platforms, if all they need to do is manipulate the stock market and dump everything again, right? They can just be like, oh, the Fed said this, and then dump a lot of their assets that they have. Now, let me remind you that this particular entity has multiple GDPs worth of value, talking like $20 trillion worth of value that it has the availability. And I'm not talking about just cash money sitting there. I'm talking about assets, all sorts of shit, big businesses all over the world that you've never even fucking heard of, that it has ownership where it sits at the board.
You know, there's like a general trend in the last 10,000 years that um, people, the people in power, first they thought that the best way to take advantage of their power was to raid a town, kill all the men, fuck all the women, take all the resources, and, and then like maybe 500 years later they're like, hey, we can just go in and fuck all their women and use their men to as slaves, and and that's like progress. And then like 500 years later they're like, hey, what if we go in there, and instead of turning them into slaves, we turn them into employees, and actually like we're more beneficial that way. And then like 500 years later it's like, well, maybe if we just take over the king and use them and tax them, then maybe we can get everything that we wanted, except they don't even know that we're doing it. And then like, for fast forward today, like maybe we should just let them control the currency, um, and maybe that we'll actually all be better off that way anyways. It's like there's like this general trend of, being making enemies with everybody and being counter, um, being like countering everything everyone does that is your enemy, like actually is counterproductive maybe.
I agree. I agree because it's really important to know that you're not necessarily letting them take control of the money. Like they already have control of it. You just need to we need to understand, not you, but we as, people need to understand that they already do have control of the money, and you need to figure out what the rules to their game is and learn how to play the game to give you the advantage, and that's it. That's why a lot of people say it's the same cycles over and over again and things haven't really ever changed. And like there's a lot of time period that's happened, especially with the United States, where there hasn't been any war, because the last time that there was war, which there was two of them, world wars that happened, they were significantly satisfied with the amount of wealth that they were able to garner and all the fuck around and the availability of doing all this crazy fucked up shit that they've had to do for such a long time. It's just now coming to a screeching fucking halt for them, and they're gonna have to find a new shiny object to ride with, which they have plenty of assets and resources across the world to deploy at any point in time. And cryptocurrency seems like the best one. So they don't would not cryptocurrency exactly, but digital currency seems like a pretty easy one to latch onto, because Bitcoin's already proved that you could have a digital currency that gives you an availability of gaining appreciated value off of it just by, um, well, a correlation to the stock market helps too, which is there, and they can't do anything about it. And that's where we gain the advantage sometimes in crypto. I mean, you can go into a horse where the rest of the community doesn't, there is no community, and now you're kind of stuck. But we're not in that. We're in the development of community behavior, and with like Hex, like there is a pretty large community that has already been established there as it is, and it's growing, right? Um, through Maxi and Hedron and Icosa, like we have the availability to come at people in all different directions, right? If they're like, ew, Hex, then you just come at them about Hedron the next time. And then they might be interested in it. And then
Yeah,
not
I
even,
gotta do that.
and then you come at them, if they're not sure about that because it sounds too confusing, come at them with Icosa and be like, shit, you could get involved in this thing. Like the fucking yield is just amazing. Get involved with this part of the thing, and they'll be fucking hexagons and not even fucking realize it. Like there's so many options. I mean, even with Maxi and the rest of them, like I'm sure that they will have opportunities, and they'll establish those opportunities to actually build their community further than absorbing hexagons and absorbing hedronians and trying to absorb Icosa individuals who are already doing their own thing in protocols that give them the option to do their own fucking thing.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with poly, and I do like Like I don't know, Mac. You're right that Maxi was a decent product. But the my problem with Poly is that the whole point was to create a game around the auctions, and they basically turned on God mode, and they kind of killed the game.
Yeah, well, they don't have to. I mean, if we don't participate with it, then they don't have
Yeah,
very mode to happen there. Which, I mean, it would make sense to me if people who understand how to play this game would not see it to be very much of an incentive to go that way and get rid of the shiny objects when you can just participate in the protocol and not even deal with the liquidations in the first place, and just know because they exist that they're going to cause for more competition to happen with the people that do participate, that do struggle and spend gas to go in there and cause for these things to happen. More Hedron's going to get burned, and you just staking in the first place and not getting rid of your shiny objects, believe me, is going to pay you at a shorter term than what's being advertised to be sold to you as the next shiny object.
yeah.
Shorter
Like
term.
for example, like there was speculation. Like I wonder if there's going to be any HSIs before Poly announced any HSIs that go to auction that sell for 1% of their value. That nobody's talking about that anymore because um yeah, if people put $10 million in Hedron, I mean not in Hedron but in Poly. I don't know, I actually don't know that much about Poly, so I can't say, but I don't see anybody talking about that anymore.
If people put
Yeah,
10
exactly.
if people put in $10 million into Poly worth of Hedron, then let's say that they were not as successful as they would have liked to have been, then they're going to stick around longer with this water protocol to try to continue to keep in competing with people. So eventually, like the layman individual competing with them are going to essentially run out of gas or availability to compete after a certain period of time. So it's like they're establishing this position um, against us as a community already in that stance, right? And I have to view it that way, because they're going after the people and they're going after the smaller stakes. So if you are a smaller individual that wants to be able to compete, you could have competed in those smaller ones that the bigger guys may not have had so much interest in, because they would have went for the bigger ones, and the smaller ones would have been available for the other people to just pick off. And there's could be potentially like thousands of them that you could just pick off on your own to increase your own uh, availability of using the buyback function, and then I don't know, increasing your pool size while the inflation is happening during these events that we've been telling you about over and over again. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that you'd want to play this game with an entity and like put poly into it, or put your Hedron in to increase the poly amount and give them more sway in that availability, for that, and use and have that as a competitor under your own volition. Like it's almost like poisoning your own community's water and being like, oh, it's all in the water that we got, so we have to deal with this now. So let's add more poison to the mix too to make sure that it works, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't incentivize any staker at all as an individual staker.
Yeah, I think his problem is that he's got all these ideas, and he doesn't. I don't think he's realizing that his ideas are getting worse. Each one is getting diluted. Like his first idea was the best one. I
I don't have any idea. I mean, that's the funny thing about it is just because things become available, like people are going to use it anyway, right? And that's kind of like where I'm sitting at, where I kind
Yeah,
of have to, I guess, right?
someone should convince him to make a new token that isn't based on another token. That's its own thing. That yeah, like Icosa or Hedron.
But that's not what they do though, Kevin. Like
I
that's
I think
like they're
that he wanted to. If he wanted to, he might be able to. I don't know.
well, I mean, maybe. So like okay, so like when Maxi was made, the intention was to solve a problem for gas, which I mean is pretty helpful, and they locked up a fuck ton of hex too, right? So as a hexagon, that's good news. So that's that. There's a very good understanding why that one is so successful, right? Pretty straightforward, pretty simplistic, right? Um, as far as like coding and stuff like that, I don't know. I noticed Alex is in here, and I would love to maybe allow him the floor to speak on whatever he would like to speak about and not waste his time.
Kind of chilling at the moment. I just had a few extra minutes.
What's up, man? I saw you got harassed in the main chat.
Dude, nuts. I got so many.
I don't even know who this Mikey guy is, but I think he was baiting you, maybe potentially.
Maybe.
Because I haven't heard anybody suggest at all that you weren't going to be done with the front end at any point in time. Like I don't I don't hear that as a concern ever. So
Absolute worst case scenario, right? Let's just say like shit hits the fan, it's not done on day 90 and it comes out like day 95. It doesn't matter because they just sit there waiting for people to bid on them.
what if I tossed okay, let's talk about this then. So we know that Dipcatcher has made statements that he has third-party software that he's developed to give his executors this advantage in the liquidations auctions, and that he also has a separate node to run, so that way they're kind of like on a different port, like on a different signal, running their own front end for it, I guess. Kind of giving them like a I guess a different type of advantage with not having like some sort of pinging issue, I guess, with connectivity, right? Um, what would that give them the availability at that time to it would, wouldn't it, to run the code behind the scenes without the front end anyway? Is that true?
I mean, yeah, theoretically anyone can do that. The advantage, I don't know if it's really there, right? Because like any kind of time saving advantage where you're going to run your own archive node, like assuming you're running a good one, because they're actually really hard to run and have them be fast. But assuming you have that, um, and you're doing it all, every bit of it on your own, you still have the 5 minute reset timer during if a bid is made in the last 5 minutes. Like there's no sniping that's possible in outside of that time frame. The advantage thing to have is that it's going to allow people to pool resources together.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, since it's going to exist anyway, I have to see the positives of its existence and get over how any personal feelings may possibly be, but understand that the success rate of one definitely depends on the success rate of the other. And participation from community is definitely like going to generate that success value of participation in the end result. So
No, like the thing that's going to be interesting to see, right? Because there's a point. Like, we're talking about so many HSIs going to auction that it's hard for me to imagine that some of them don't go cheaply, right? Like, yeah, not financial advice, but I know there's a lot of hedron out there. A very big chunk of it is staked, and like probably 30-40% of the total supply is inside of Icosa. So you still have a good chunk left, but are all those people going to be overpaying? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to end up looking. Um, I think something like the whole Poly Maximus thing probably makes sense if you're a super small player that you aren't going to win anything anyway. So it's a thing to use to where you might win something. I think it's super good for those guys. Um, but it has the other side of like, if you have enough hedron that you can win them, and you are able to just claim them for yourself, like that's probably what most people will do if they have the ability to do it, is my guess.
Yeah, it would have to be an initiative to start the 24-hour countdowns to overwhelm the end results of the 5-minute countdowns. So that way you have a higher availability of winning those HSIs. And it would probably have to be like an initiative of the community to do that, because there's so many of them that cause that.
Like probably going to be held back by this system of like okay, so it decides on some HSI to bid on. Like people figure that piece out, great. It bids, but it's only going to bid within a range. And if it goes outside of that range, like it needs to go back to the drawing board, and like people kind of had to vote per se on whether they're going to bid more or not. So you're kind of in this situation where like Poly will be able to do very large bids, assuming enough people use it, but it's not going to be agile, right? Like if it's bidding on one on the very extent of its range, like, and some whale comes in and bids it like 10% higher in the last 5 minutes, I'm not sure if Poly consensus can round together fast enough to be able to make an action to increase a bid within 5 minutes. Like there's going to be, because it's ultimately going to come down to like the opinions of all the people using it. And if people disagree, nothing happens.
Interesting. Yeah, I heard that they have like some like back way of communication through their water protocol to be able to speak directly to the executors to give opinions on how they should use the funds when they're doing the bidding.
And I don't, obviously I don't know all the specifics, but
I know we had a visit from Gold Key and Dipcatcher today in the voice chat, and we had a discussion about their involvement with the hedron that's going to be put into the staking protocol, and how now they are community members, so welcome aboard, since it's going to exist, and they're probably going to have hedron left over in some respect, right? I told them they should make something that incentivizes the buyback function to be used, so that way stakers can be rewarded when the hedron's burned in the first place, to incentivize hedron burning and the rewards for the hedron stakers. Give it some more legs. And they thought that was a neat idea, and that they actually were happy about that, because I think that they really do like everything that you've done as well. I think they have good intentions, but like I said, like their success rate is going to be based on whether your Icosa community and hedron community decides whether they even want to participate with it at all. And we haven't even had any of the events happen yet, where the first bonus phase of the 90-day stakers to end their stakes and like have their bonuses happen, or the damn first part of the liquidations happen, to see how incentive incentivizing that it is to be in the staking protocol and get the higher reward in there, other than taking it out and giving away the shiny object to some other protocol that just built on top of it, that didn't even give the Icosa protocol time to have a successful like thing before any of its own events. Like, it's hard to not feel a certain way about it, I guess, in a certain respect. But the conversation with them was actually pretty cordial, and respectful. And yeah, I think that they might stop back in from time to time again, too, since, like I said, they're going to be involved anyway, one way or the other now. So,
Like I think there's going to be it's just going to be up in the air, right? Like I think it's a cool idea. I think if there are people who want to use it, they'll use it, and if they don't want to use it, then they won't. And um, the way their minting thing works, like it's the only like failure mode for Poly is not enough people use it to where it can have any kind of bidding relevance, right? Because like if you put your Hedron, like I can't remember, do they have the ability to redeem your Poly back for Hedron? Is that a
at the
no?
end of the staking term, when it's done, you can redeem the poly at the end of the 15 years for the hex that's in the HSIs, the hedron that was minted in the HSIs, and the Icosa that it mints with all the leftover hedron that it gets. Actually, when you go to the poly thing to mint poly, it gives you the option what to do with your hedron in the protocol. You can either put it to stake it and hand it over to them in the Icosa protocol for hedron staking.
Yeah, but
Or
there is no way out per se. Like let's say you put some Hedron in, convert it to Poly, and then you just want to like take your Hedron back.
no, I don't think so. They haven't expressed that, not to my knowledge.
Yeah, I didn't think that was there. So like that's the only failure mode then, is like not enough people use it. It has no ability to win anything. And you're just left with Poly. Right? Like
Oh
yes,
yeah,
you
that
can
would
stake it,
suck.
but then it's like what is the value of Poly if there's not enough people using it to even be able to effectively bid on anything?
Right. Then they're going to
What
be
would I see
banking
with it?
on, but then they're banking on the Icosa yield that they get from the hedron that they have left over in the staking protocol for the next 15 years. And that's fine because it's not going to be sell pressure or anything. I mean, not for 15 years.
So it's kind of dubious in that sense. So, I don't know if that will happen or not. I think there are going to be some very large HSIs there. Like I've watched a few of them go in and they were like 10 million, 15 million hex. They're going to bring massive prices. So I won't be surprised to see, like the only people who are going to be able to buy those in auction anywhere near, like assuming they bid up to anywhere near their actual valuation, are going to be people who were hex sharks who didn't already dump their hedron bags, of which there's like literally 2 people. So, I'm kind of in this spot where those could go really high, and you may see like dolphins go into this poly thing just for those. I don't even think Godwell can superly effectively bid anymore. He's staked almost entire hedron bag.
I mean, how much can he? I mean, I don't know if you know this statistic, but how much can he mint per day?
Oh,
Isn't it? Isn't it in the
it was like
3 billion, something like that?
yeah, it's a big number. He's
Yeah.
he's
I mean,
the massive guy.
He could mint again to like right during the auctions and be like, "Cha-ching, I'm ready to party," if he wanted to.
It says to me that he took like 4 trillion hedron and staked it all. Well, see, and like I don't think someone like God was any incentive to bid in the auctions. I think if
Me
you're
too.
God Whale, your incentive is probably to stake everything and just eat the Icosa yield that comes from the auctions.
Or what about do participate in it to use the buyback function to continue the perpetuation of the HSIs.
That would be similar to what he did with Hex by not staking Hex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways people are going to play this game. Yeah, I think there's quite a few people who will choose to just remain staked throughout the entire thing just to collect maximum yield. And then obviously there's a lot of people excited to bid on auctions. But I personally think there will be a good chunk of people who use Poly. It's just probably going to be focused on those mega stakes, is my guess.
Well, they came in, well, okay. I guess it doesn't matter what they say, right? But because to actually give away their position of how they're really actually going to bid would be not advantageous, I guess, for them to do. But they're already fainting towards making suggestions that they're going to go after the smaller HSIs that after 15 years, because they were made as 5555, that it's not going to incentivize people to have those. And it's almost unjustifiable that they were made in the first place. God forbid. And they want to be able to handle the gas costs and absorbing all of those and holding on to them for long periods of time. Because they were like, it doesn't even matter, because the biggest ones that are there, even like the ones that are 1,200 T shares, they don't even come close to the bigger pays better bonus. So their reference was it was only 1% of being close to 1. So that wasn't even what they were going to go for. Right? Because I'd even suggested, I was like, so that 1,200 T-share one, if somebody comes in and gets it and holds it as an individual and then throws it in the buyback and all of a sudden they have 300,000 Icosa in their hands, like that might wreck parity there. They might test the liquidity with it. And like, if you guys take it and hold it for the whole duration of 15 years, then we don't have to worry about that sucker for a while.
True.
And they were like, nope, we're going after the small guys. And I'm like, don't tell a room full of Icosa community members that you're coming after them. Like that's what you like. I didn't say it like that really, but I was like, that's kind of a bullish thing to say to a room full of participants of what you say that you're going to make as a competitor against them, is what we have here, right? So
it's going to be fun to watch how that plays out. But I think the big thing for me in this scenario, I understand why they're doing this like behind the scenes execution of bid thing. I get it. I get they want that advantage. Like the only things I see wrong with it are like, well, so you're putting Hedron in this thing and you don't necessarily know how it's going to be bid. You just hope it's in your best interest. And two, like I can't get around the fact that maybe it'll end up like this is just FUD really, so don't take it seriously. But it just screams like security to me, just on the sense that like it's not all on chain, right? Like maybe they have a bot that's doing it and it's somehow justifiably not security, and that's fine. I don't actually know. No one's gonna know, and the point is not to know. It's supposed to be a secret. But not knowing that bit of information, you just can't be certain of like whose best interest are they acting in. You don't know.
The now that the Tornado Cash USDC has been locked up, that kind of brings in the question, if any of these projects built on other projects get shot down by the SEC, then theoretically the Ethereum could, you know, they might, those transactions might not get confirmed by Ethereum nodes, and then the poly ends up being locked, you know, that all that hex that was locked up in poly, or you know, I don't know. This is fun too. Like, I don't know. I'm just something to think about.
If it goes that way, if like the world goes direction, and we get to this place to where the majority of validators on Ethereum can just say no to transactions because for whatever arbitrary reason, and they're not massively penalized for that, and it's used as securities enforcement or tornado cash enforcement or whatever. Like blockchain's dead if that happens. Like that's the end of it, at least as we know it.
I think that is the case for Ethereum 2.0. Like more than 50% of the validators are following the SEC guidance or whatever. But yeah,
So
who knows?
it's kind of a weird statistic. So they won't validate it, but they're not rejecting blocks from other validators
Okay.
that did. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
the thing. It's like
important.
as long as there's one validator somewhere in the world that'll do it, it works. But if they start actively rejecting blocks from other validators that did validate it, we've got a really big crypto DeFi problem.
Okay.
That kills DeFi entirely if they do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would just mean that, I mean, maybe even Ethereum just wouldn't be, you know, maybe some other node, some other network like Pulse Chain would be better.
I'm hopeful that doesn't happen, but that would suck.
It like I don't I it's good. Like, even though this stuff's really on the outlier, it's good to think about and talk about. Because I think, yeah, I think you're right that they're not they're not going, or they haven't yet, and it's pretty unlikely that they will shut down all validated blocks that don't go by those rules.
As it is now, they would get mega slashed, right? But slashing in it's a little bit different than like slashing that we're used to on the pulse chain side. But um, the ETH validation side for staking and doing all that stuff, if you have a node that is perceived by the network as like actively doing harm to the network, there's incentive currently for people like you and me to run slasher nodes that go around and find those bad actors and say, hey, this guy fucked up. And you get parts of his staking rewards.
That's good.
It's cool. I hope they don't change that. They could honestly make that penalty more severe if they wanted to, but
Should keep everybody honest, at least.
I wonder which node Jack is running that he's getting all those fees from.
I have no clue.
But that wouldn't even count as a bad actor, right? If he's somehow getting those raising the fees just for his own benefit.
Yeah, like the only thing they're really going to penalize people for is like you actively rejecting valid blocks or you trying to inject invalid blocks, like stuff that should be penalized.
Gotcha.
So, what do you guys think of the latest hex FUD?
You talking about the SEC violator?
Yeah,
Nothing burger. Again, somebody turning themselves in That's just funny. Isn't that
Sure.
what happened? I mean,
could go a lot of ways. It's so vague that nobody knows. I mean, it's undoubtedly, Maddie and Hex Joker got a letter of some type, right? We can't verify that the letter is authentic in any way. Could be fake. People have sent fake SEC letters in the past. My guess is that even if they are real, they are likely just looking for evidence that some Richard Hart or somebody in whatever that conglomerate would be is like paying these people to talk about Hex on YouTube, which I'm almost 100% certain is not the case. So, like, I don't think there's going to really be any information there that they would want. I think, Maddie seems to be taking it the proper way. Hex Joker really took it like, get your lawyers ready. It's going to go down. It's like, no, typically it doesn't go. Just because they're asking questions doesn't mean they're looking. That's like a bad thing, But on the other side of this, I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, Maddie said he got a notification from UPS, and typically they wouldn't use UPS. They would use like certified mail USPS. So that seems a lot to me.
yeah, and it seems funny that like one person acted emotionally, right? Like you probably would, if you thought that it was real. Being Hex Joker, and he's an emotional character anyway, right? And Maddie, who generally doesn't, for his profession, you'd think he would be able to handle some pressure, but definitely doesn't suggest like he does. Handling it so well would suggest that maybe just one of them was real.
Maybe. Then the other side of this, I can't quite wrap my head around. Just like, of all the people you could send this to, like, you're the SEC. All right, you're the SEC. You're going to start sending letters to people. Maybe more people received a letter that we don't know about, and that's fair. But why Hex Joker?
Because
why send it to him?
Well, he makes the loudest noise. He's the biggest squealer. Like
Is
a long
really,
time
though?
ago.
Do you
He's
think maybe
doxed and
he was this the plan from the beginning? Like Joker was a plant.
Well, he doesn't even have to be knowledgeable to him to be the one that plays the fool anyway, because that's just his general nature to play the fool anyway. He's going to be dramatic. He is dramatic.
Yeah, it seems like it's like, well, let's take the most volatile character, and then in front of the whole community, put him on the spotlight, and
did you see he's launching his
like,
own token?
This gets down into the deeper weeds of this stuff, right? Because it's like, all right, you're the Hex Joker, right? So you if you could convincingly manufacture these letters, like, it's not unreasonable that Hex Joker would know where to send Maddie mail, right? Like, a lot of the streamers, there's like an inner circle there. A lot of them know each other and have each other's phone numbers. It's like a, kind of inner group. He would know where to send a lot of those people mail. So I'm like, what are the chances Hex Joker had some really convincing letters made and just to like beat the squeaky wheel again?
I feel like
that would be some funny shit.
I feel like impersonating the SEC is like a major crime.
It might be. I haven't really looked into that.
What happened? Did they do just more fun or something? Or
maybe send the evidence to the SEC anonymously, and then if they look at it and their behavior is like, we're not doing that there, then then I guess you would know that it was some community members doing some stuff that they probably shouldn't have been doing.
I'm back. I cut out there for a second.
I guess it's not really like a witch hunt, even if it was just somebody's agenda to be like, well, any amount of publicity is good publicity to get eyes to look at stuff. I guess.
I've dealt with regulators a lot when I was a superintendent, and generally my experience with them is the first thing they do isn't write a letter. Like if you're doing something, the first thing they usually do is they call you and they talk to you, or they show up, at the site, and then they're like, you got to change this, and they'll then if you don't change it, then they send you a letter. Um, but I guess that's not the case for like the IRS. But I feel like the SEC is one of those. Um, but it's not like a cease and desist thing. It's like I haven't even read it, but it sounds like it's not. Like I feel like they would have.
It sounds like they're just they call it a subpoena. I don't know if it can't actually be a real subpoena because it would be in a court system, but supposedly the SEC has their confidential ways of doing that kind of stuff. But it sounds like they're more or less just asking for information they're like, hey, we want to know everything about you, and we want to know everything you know about Richard Hart and Hex and Pulse Chain and PulseX and all these other things. So
That's that. Is it like legal discovery, or is it like a let's talk kind of thing?
it seems like it's more of a let's talk. They're basically saying, hey, we're doing an investigation and we believe you may have valuable information. So here is a big fancy letter that says you have to comply and give us this information. Whether you actually do have to comply and give that information, I don't know. But this is where I'm in this position of, it seems weird that they would pick Hex Joker of all people to send one to, because like if I was the SEC and I wanted to go after these streamers who I potentially believe were being paid to promote Hex, and I wanted to get all this information on Hex and all these things and Richard and all that stuff. If I wanted to do that, I'd probably go after all the streamers that have had Richard on my stream. So yes, that would include, but it wouldn't include Hex Joker.
Maybe he's already talked to them, and this is kind of a way of, like we've you guys probably know, like if you ever talk to anybody important, anything important, you want it in writing that this happened, like this is how things are going.
But all that aside, the part that throws me for a loop the most is all of Richard's recent tweets with like, "Don't talk to police. Here's how you use secret chats on Telegram." Blah blah. I'm like, it's like, wait a minute. Maybe it is real. Who knows?
In
Yeah, I
Joker's
mean,
video, in his live stream tonight, he said that it was definitely real, but it was kind of odd where he's launching his own coin that's supposed to benefit Hex and be launched on Pulse Chain and all this other stuff. And that's like what his whole point of his live stream was tonight, which same thing, if you noticed in his Twitter video last night, the last thing he mentions at the end of his video is he's going to be launching his own token. So, I mean, this has got another narrative to it besides just he got
yeah.
served and he's sad. He's launching his own coin and he's using this big RH doesn't want you to know what's going on, and here's this big thing with the SEC. He didn't tell any new info. He didn't say anything. He said he got served some papers. They're real. But by the way, he's launching his own coin on top of Hex, and it's going to be on Pulse Chain. So
He pulled a Jack.
It's all like, hey, Jack made all this fucking money doing Zen, actually the same thing.
He's working with the guys from DGen Protocols.
But I think impersonating the SEC is somewhere along the lines of impersonating a federal officer.
It might be, and I would say if there's any hex streamer, like if I was other side of the thing, so I'm not the SEC anymore. I'm somebody, presumably Hex Joker, who's going to impersonate the SEC and do all this stuff for my own token launch. If I'm in that position, Maddie's the last person I would send that document to, because I would find Maddie to be one of the most likely to actually report it. I don't know. It's weird. There's a lot of weirdness here. And of course, BitBoy has to go on about it and say that the SEC is suing Hex and Richard Hart, which is, even if these letters are real, is not the case. At least not at the moment.
Richard has enough, I guess. They're like, if you look at it from like the worst case scenario, is, I guess that they want him to stop streaming or something, and then but Hex goes on. Like, it's not like they can't kill it. But probably the most beneficial scenario for them is actually just, we want some taxes or something, and then they have a lawsuit, and then Richard has plenty of money to fight any lawsuit.
I have a feeling I know what this might be more of. There's a guy, I don't know if anybody remembers, convicted hex offender from the Pulse Chain chat. He's for some reason real disgruntled with Richard, and this guy is some crazy troll where he's got hundreds of different SIM cards and all these other Telegram accounts and all this other stuff. He sent in hundreds of filings to the SEC, and I've seen the actual filings that he sent in, where he sent in these complaints against Richard.
Yeah,
It's a bunch of nothing. It's somebody who's pissed because they had to wait for a sacrifice.
yeah. In that group, he admitted to it as well. To hear the Joker,
I've seen the things posted that he put in there, which is crazy.
yeah, I thought it was odd that there was some postings going on in that room, and then it came out publicly afterwards. Yeah, but I know that it originated from that room.
Yeah, no, I've seen the SEC filings that he posted and bragging about it and all this stuff, but I mean, it's just some crazy clown.
Worst case scenario, all this is like, let's assume that's all true and the filings are all real. Then, worst case it is SEC got a bunch of complaints and they're like, hey, we had to follow up on this stuff, and that's what we're seeing. And I think that's fine for Hex. I don't, I'm no attorney, but I think of everything, Hex has the strongest case for not being a security. Obviously, Pulse Chain and PulseX are slightly dubious, right? Because they're not an ICO, but they have the mechanics of an ICO. So like maybe there would be some things there, but even then, it would be no different than EOS or whatever. They basically like, oh well, by the time they would actually do anything about it, it would be launched presumably. So they'd be like, well, it was a security, now it's not. Here's a slap on the wrist. Typically is how that goes anyway. Because like at the end of the day, this is probably the piece that most people don't really get. Like there's very few blockchain projects that are actually securities, right? Like I'll say like 100 or less that have actually been deemed like, hey, this is a security. It can never not be a security. Like those things get screwed. And those usually because they depend on some managerial effort to continue to exist and run in perpetuity. The But when you have this like other side where like it may have been a security, but now it isn't, or whatever, like the SEC legally has to act in the best interest of the investors in that scenario all the time, and that is never going to be kill the thing. It can, because Hex is immutable or whatever.
That sounds positive, at least in some sort of way.
Like it sucks. Like it's the SEC is a big boogeyman in crypto, but realistically, like when it comes to like things like Veritasium, right? Like that entire thing was a security. There's no way it ever wasn't. Like it directly, basically advertised itself as being one, and so Veritasium's banned everywhere because it could never not be a security. There's never going to actually be decentralized. But when it comes to things like Ethereum, where they said, "Oh well, it was a security, but now it's not," so we're going to say it's not, and all this other stuff. Anytime that's ever been an issue, they've, and for example, EOS is a really good example where they made billions of dollars fundraising and got a couple $1 million fine, and that was the end of it. Like that's highly likely here because the SEC is not going to say, "Oh, well, you broke the rules, so we're going to make everyone who ever invested in this also lose their ass." Like that's not their job. They don't do that. The only reason this is even a big deal is because exchanges, particularly centralized exchanges, are very like security, like anti-security, security phobic, because they're not registered to trade securities, and they don't really want to be registered to trade securities. So it's like this big end of the world scenario when something in crypto is labeled as a security because like nobody wants to touch it anymore because there's no one's licensed to touch it. It matters less in DeFi because even if Uniswap delists it, it doesn't matter. It's already delisted. Like Hex isn't on the main token list already. Like they put it on the banned token list, it's still not going to be on the main token list. You can still trade it through alternative interfaces. Like not the end of the world. It's just it's like it's a big crypto boogeyman that a lot of people fear for unreasonable reasons. But I'm kind of in this position where it's like, there's some things pointing to fake letters, some things pointing to real Redditors. Either way, I don't see any issue with Hex. The only thing would be is potentially Pulse Chain and PulseX, and with how long it's taken the SEC just to deal with Ripple. By the time they could even get around to actually doing anything formal, Pulse and PulseX are probably out, and then it doesn't matter. So just a lot of FUD, a lot of attention at the moment. I know if I got a letter from the SEC also, I probably wouldn't go on YouTube and tell the world about it.
Yeah. I think that first round of SEC stuff probably was that convicted guy. And this new stuff that we're hearing is exactly like what you're saying, Alex. Them just riding the coattails of something that had happened, and it intrigued them with everybody talking about Hex when it happened. It was trending. So
information will come over time, or it won't, and we'll all forget about it. One of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the relevant understanding that even if it got delisted, it wouldn't matter because it's not listed anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, they have
Like-
a catch-22 where like if they do anything regulatory and it fails, then they are like showing us that they don't have any power.
Yeah, because like we onboard.
And also,
Go ahead, Alex.
Here's a potential benefit of this. I would hope this is the case. Actually, this would be pretty ingenious if someone cooked this up. But I think Hex is very strongly not a security, and if it went through this process through an SEC investigation, and the SEC published a thing saying that it wasn't a security, that would be huge validation.
I would have
Richard,
to agree.
have that on the. He could have that on the front of every page everywhere.
Yeah, I would have to agree. That would be awesome. Yeah, maybe they would come through their findings and realize that they can't say anything about it because it would just promote for it.
I would love that to be the end result, but knowing the SEC, what if this is real? What they're going to do is they're going to do a little bit of digging, realize it's not, and then stop saying anything, to stop communicating with people. Because typically that's what they do. They'll come in, they'll be like, "Oh, this might be security. You got some reports." Then then there's not a clear cut case, right? Like if they only make examples of people who are like really clear cut cases generally, because they don't have a lot of resources. And Hex is a very not clear cut case, and I would say Pulse Chain and Pulse X are like not really clear cut. Like you know, like they're more clear cut than Hex, but they're not. Yeah, there'd be a lot of arguing, going back and forth with lawyers on that one. And they've been arguing with Ripple for 2 years, so I'm kind of looking at the situation like most likely they look at this and they're like, this would kind of actually suck to fight. Is it worth our time? Probably not. And then they just stop talking about it.
Yeah, I think the majority of the SEC and the IRS's job is compliance, which means, you know, you got to follow the rules and regulations, which is really hard to do on something that isn't a security. Like that's the whole basis behind it needs to be a security because they can't regulate something that isn't a security. It's a product. Like it's a whole different. It's like how do you yeah, and then yeah.
In my case in point, Ripple is a clear cut security. They chose to make an example of them because it truly meets the definition in every respect. And they're still fighting that court case.
Oh wow. I thought that was but yeah, it's like what like they're gonna you know they show up at your door or something, or they write you a letter and they're like, hey, you need to start doing this. How do you do that with something that's not a security? Um, you need to shut down the internet or something like I don't, like
Like,
okay,
I don't know.
and it predates
In
any
this spot
laws.
where
They say a bunch of North Koreans have been staking Hex and using their proceeds of 38% for the last 2 years to buy missiles, and then they sanction it. No more
that would be
staking.
the U.S. Treasury, and that could happen. Like that's more likely to happen, in my opinion, than the SEC saying Hex is a security.
Yeah. They'd be like, it's too damn good that even terrorists are using it. We have to stop it.
Like there was this thing with the oil company I worked for was an independent company that owned oil platforms, and they were one of the first to own oil platforms. So there were no laws regulating how to abandon them because usually it's a major oil company and you know that they're good for the money to abandon them. So they had to write a bunch of laws like 3 or 4 years after they acquired the platforms. And since those laws predate um, them acquiring it, they don't apply to them.
It's interesting. How you guys feel about this electric cars with built-in speed limiters thing?
I don't see the end result of electric cars actually doing any good for the environment, considering like
Oh,
get the tour on the gigafactory that builds the car and uses the batteries and all the stuff that needs to happen to get the end result. And then you still have to
I
use
don't care about that.
you still have to use diesel powered motors to
It's not the
power
whole thing. The whole thing is
charge
like,
to run the charger. You need
Sure,
to have a
sure.
diesel powered. Anyway,
this whole thing is like not about electric. Like, it's not about the environment. It's never been about the environment. The politicians can give two fucking shits less. They just know a lot of people care about the environment, and if they say, "Oh, we're gonna mandate electric cars," well, it creates a new industry with new jobs, which they can be like, "Oh yeah, we made all these jobs, great," and they're like, "Yeah, we're doing all this green stuff, gets people to vote for them." They give two fucking shits less about electric cars. They don't care. And they'll like electric cars will, if you are very very mild with your electric car, you can drive it to the point where it's carbon neutral. It's possible to do. Most people will not own an electric car long enough. Like, they will have sold it to somebody else and bought a new one, and it'll become that other person's problem. And then if that other person ever gets the battery replaced, which they can't because they don't make batteries for them, then there's more carbon offset that has to happen. But it's like the only electric car technology that stands to actually massively decrease emissions is probably hydrogen. Or just like there's only a handful of companies actually working on it, and the most promising stuff's in Australia. But what's crazy to me is like the amount of legislation that's being proposed that effectively, like, I don't want to say like Chinese social credit system, but it's like Chinese social credit system cars. Like, they're trying to push it that way. Especially like EU's gonna have, like, is it 2 years from now? Every car manufactured has to basically scream at you when you drive over a speed limit. And then New York has this new program for their for electric cars sold in New York that they're working on, where the car would actually not allow you to drive above the speed limit. And I'm like, man, if you guys do anything like this, like, people are just gonna hold on to their gasoline cars for as long as they fucking can.
Maybe that's what maybe the oil lobby's planning on that.
oh, so parts cars
Well, and
Parts
like
might be something that's going to be needed in the future.
for
I
that
just want-
electric,
Yeah.
I just want to know what they're doing to improve the electrical grid infrastructure to support all these electric vehicles, because we're already getting commercials and things for brownouts and don't plug your vehicle in, and we need to save power when we're going all, in the middle of summer with all everybody's ACs on. So what are they going to do if they switch all these cars to electric? Where are they going to plug them all in at?
about that either. They don't want you to have power. It's particularly bad in like California, right? Because they've done all these changes. They always miss it, like super underestimate like what people are going to do. Like, they come out and say, okay, gas cars banned by 2035. That's over 10 years away. Fantastic. What do people do? They immediately go out and buy Teslas. Immediately. Even though this is like further than 10 years down the road, they immediately buy Teslas. And like, the number one cause of wildfires in California is their electrical grid. So like that was a mistake. Then they say, okay, well, we're going to ban small engines, like, in actually like a year from now. And so, like, what's everyone doing? Oh, they're buying all this electric lawn equipment and all this stuff. And
They don't
it's
even
just like,
have a gas lawnmower at Home Depot here anymore. Like, all the tools, everything, it's all battery. California, pretty much.
but you can't charge it, so you can't cut your grass. So then your HOA gets to charge, like, skip your fees or whatever, because everything in California's got an HOA. It's just like a vicious cycle of incompetence. The funniest thing I recently read, what's that guy who bought that Hyundai Elantra N, and the CHP pulled him over and said he had to fix his exhaust. So he went to Hyundai and said, "Hey, they said my exhaust it's factory, right? Because it's like the sport model of the Hyundai Elantra. But these guys said I need to fix it. Well, the dealer just gives them an invoice back saying, hey, we can't fix it because it's stock." Then he goes to the ref office to get it like checked out for emissions so he can get passed. And they're like, "Well, we can't pass it because you didn't get anything fixed." So he's like stuck in this spot where it's like there's nothing to fix, but they can't reinstate the title because, or the registration, because nothing got fixed. I'm just like, oh my God, that's so horrible.
So they put that person into a situation to have to go make an insurance claim to have the pieces removed and then put back on and have the insurance be charged to claim a receipt that something was actually done to get through the red tape.
Well, I think what he's doing is just challenging the ticket with a
Yeah.
lawyer or something, but it's just like, it's not conducive to like society. California should split itself into like 3 states. It would be managed much better.
I agree. Or just become a lawyer. Be a lawyer and fucking sue everybody.
Yeah, like,
right?
That's the only way you can make, you know, a good living out there.
Yeah, that's like the best state to be a lawyer.
Used to be New Jersey. They used to call New Jersey the Sioux State. But I see that it has expanded
It
its
still
realm.
is.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's why you don't get into an argument in New Jersey. Because they
I
love
went to New Jersey once, and I got yelled at for pumping my own gas.
Yep.
Same thing happened to me in Oregon.
In Colombia, nobody pumps their own gas. It's like, I don't know if you're even allowed to.
That's how it is in New Jersey, but I had no fucking clue, so I just drove through there one day, and I was like, I'm gonna get gas. Go out, put my card in the thing, pull out the handle, and this guy in the fucking safety vest comes screaming at me. I'm like, what? I'm just filling my
Honestly,
car up, dude.
It's not a bad way to do it because they check your tires, they check your oil level, and they wash your windshield, they do everything.
No, they don't, dude. That's like heaven on earth somewhere in New Jersey.
I don't know where the fuck you
are. Oh, okay.
I mean, that's how the gas stations used to be out here a long time ago. They had full service and regular.
Yeah, I gotta go to bed. Nice talking to you guys.
You too, Kevin. I agree. Thanks for coming in. That was a nice thing to have happen. I know that you're busy. How are you feeling? We didn't even get into that whole thing that you're doing as far as construction. I seen on your Instagram that you have some progress going on, and you seem like you're getting prepared for winter with insulation. That's fun.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a race to make sure we beat the freeze.
Of course. The insulation is itchy as fuck.
The building has no power at all at the moment. It's all stripped out, so it's like gotta get that going, gotta get the new insulation and roof on, and the siding and the new furnaces, and it's like, you know, it's work.
Yeah, that's a lot going on.
I'm an electrical contractor, and I was looking at some of those pictures, and it looks like you got some serious power running to that place eventually.
It's two 1200 amp, 480 volt three phase feeds, that's why we bought the building, because it was like, yeah, it's dilapidated as fuck, but it had the feeds already, so I didn't have to go through the approval process for all that stuff.
Yeah, three phase is the way to go for sure.
All right, well, I'm out of here for now. I'll talk to you guys later.
Hey, Alex, quick question.
Sure.
So I'm still working on some very special animated GIFs for the artwork. I'm, each one takes me about a day to do, and I just wondered if we're very close to the deadline when you're going to be uploading some of the artwork or all of the artwork, and assigning them to the Wattses. I'm not too late, am I? Just squeezing an
No,
extra.
you're good. I was gonna do it like a week ago, but auctions and stuff have been taking my time lately, so it's probably not going to happen until after auction time. So we've got some, like a week or two.
Oh, great, cool, thanks, Alex. So just on a practical level, I've created a special folder with the GIFs in, which is up on Peter's server.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much, Alex.
Good. Yep. I'll talk to you guys later.
Later, Alex.
That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, unexpected.
What I missed? Give me a quick rundown.
He gave us a sneak peek of the new front end. He kind of showed us how it all worked, and yeah, you missed it, man.
No, he came in and he said that he had all intentions for everything to be running by the time that the liquidations start, and he's like, worst case scenario is that it's up and running 5 days later. No big fucking deal. So we're like, okay.
Yeah, because you'll still be able to bid on Hedron.pro, right?
I mean, if you can get the front end to work.
Well, how are people gonna bid if there's no front end?
Contract call,
or no one will be able to bid.
They could do it they could call the contract functions on the back end if they have the information for the HSI that they need to have to be able to do it. Like, and then they'd have to be able to have their own server node running to be able to supply what they need to be able to manage the front end. So, technically it can be done, but chances are it won't really be that possible to be done. But I think best case scenario for Alex is to do exactly what he said, right? Like, give both polar positions in my public speaking on a certain thing, especially when I'm the founder of the stuff working on the front ends and that, right? To not have expectations, I would say, well, this could happen or this could happen. Right? Especially when he says worst case scenario before making, after making the first initial statement of my intentions are to have it done, it would suggest that he's putting himself in a neutralized position for everybody. So I'm fine with that, right? Like, I get it. And he wasn't badgered about a bunch of stuff about it either. So that was kind of neat. But at least we got some sort of response from him about it. So that's cool.
So does that mean that the auctions could not start for 5 days after?
Well, I mean, if people don't have the capability of being able to bid on them, then they just sit there. Yeah. stagnant. Like nobody
That'd
bid,
be cool.
then they just sit there in the default until the front end is operational, and then you can bid on them. I mean, there'll be like a 5 days worth of them just stacked on top of each other if that was the case.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't end up looking too bad though if it doesn't go up and then there's select people who are going in the first 5 days and scooping up HSIs. That'd be, I don't give a shit, but hopefully it won't look too bad for Alex.
I think it'll. I think that the way that it sounded to me, like he is not worried about it to the extent that he came into the room to talk to us about it in the first place. That's how not worried he is about the front end stuff.
True,
I got
cool.
faith. I got faith in him.
Yeah. Right? Like, there's only certain stuff that he can say to the community anyway. And the way that he speaks is to understand the room that you're speaking to. Right? So when you already know the answers, and then you can behave a certain way after that, and you're the one that holds all the answers, then you know how to behave and speak a certain way without coming into some violation of where a whistleblower could, potentially have an option to win some money from the SEC by turning him in, which that's a thing apparently, I guess. Look it up. So he's very smart and calculated in those types of things. But yeah, he wouldn't be here talking to us about it if he was actually worried about it. And to cover his own ass, given both extremes, still leaves you with not knowing exactly what the fuck to believe, which is why I think it's understandable that the first couple questions was that. So you mean that it might be 5 days later than happening in 9 days, like I think it's going to be, is reasonable thought process, of course. But he did that intentionally to leave everybody not knowing exactly what's going to happen, because that's the best way to have it. He can't say things to give any of us an advantage at all. But we can speculate on what we've heard and then use that to our advantage, I suppose, right? Since we heard it live and in color, and we have the opportunity to talk about it afterwards.
Well, so a part of me goes, I hope it wasn't recorded because can you imagine the FUD that would occur from that thought process and speculation? But then the other part of me is like, God, get it out there, because we could either have one of two things happen. The price could go lower, which means more hedron burn, or the price will really, go up even more because it gives other opportunities for people to acquire more hedron.
Yeah, I mean, any relevant speculation on the extreme end of negative or positive type of talk, right, about stuff tends to cause for weird shit to happen, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not here to really kind of speculate on the buy the rumor, sell the news type stuff. I know how the contracts work, and that's the reason why I participate in the first place. Right? And then I'll take advantage of what the numbers show me through a relevant period of time. And then, I don't know, nobody can calculate how long they have to actually live, but they can do a good amount of judgment in a certain respect, at least, right? And then put yourself in the biggest advantage on your own behalf, under your own volition. Maybe learn some stuff along the way, and be one of those people that knows enough to be dangerous before it gets to the point where everybody has to figure out how it all works in a certain respect. And there aren't too many things that are like, here, just give them to me and I'll do stuff with it, because it makes it so you don't have to do it and it's easy. Well, maybe there might be an advantage to knowing how all this stuff works and being able to be the individual that decides to move around and do stuff on their own behalf whenever they want. There's a lot of benefits to it, honestly. Here I said I was gonna head out too. So anyway, I am going to go to bed. So maybe tomorrow I'll hop back on and we can have further discussions about things. Maybe even get Alex to pop back in. Who knows? I guess it depends on how many participants are there. If we have like a bunch of people for some reason, maybe we can actively hit him with a DM and get him to just come in. Because it didn't seem like a whole lot of people had a whole lot of questions. Like everybody was almost like in a little bit of shock and awe at first, and
Yeah. His smooth, calm demeanor is very comforting.
You might be busy tomorrow in this group because isn't that the launch of Poly tomorrow?
Oh, is it? That's cool.
Yeah, I think I saw it on. I think I just saw it on Twitter, and I went to go look at Dipcatcher's video.
some poor guy posted it in the Icosa chat earlier that whatever day that it was that they were launching Poly thing, and I just being a pain in the ass, I posted exclamation mark rules right away underneath him putting the date on it, which when you do that exclamation mark rules at the bottom, it says you're only able to talk about Hex, Hedron, Icosa, ETH, and Pulse. That's it. So I was being kind of a smartass, I guess.
Right, because people are going to come in and ask you about this, right? Like that. I heard you earlier saying something about it, and I had to get off, but I was like, gosh darn it, I wanted to know if you had an updated perspective on it.
Well, I mean, I don't want
anybody that asks me about Poly, I'm sending them straight to Hexecutioner.
Oh yeah, do. Please do. And I'll empower them with their own individuality and hope that they make the right decision for themselves. And that's all I'll do. You have the power of doing all this stuff on your own. Why would you hand it to somebody else? And they're gonna be like, well, we're gonna do the same thing that you could have done with it. So why don't you just hand it to me instead? Like, tell me how much sense that makes.
Maybe not everybody else is like us, where we're counting down the days and minutes until this thing happens. Where, I mean, we want to do it just for the fun of it. It's going to be exciting.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's not just a one-day event. Like, this thing's going to keep happening over and over and over and over again if we do it right, as a community, understanding how the protocol works and just participating and doing naturally what's there, right? Like, then we're going to keep continuing to get rewarded with higher payouts. So I think it would be beneficial for all of us to work together as a community would, and utilize the code the way it's meant to be used, and incentivize us to get as much Icosa as we possibly can. So that way we can actually use the Icosa hex pair and be able to use that as an advantage of ours. Right? Wouldn't that make sense?
Quattro Cinco for life.
Well, yeah. I mean, be a part of the mechanic that makes the T-share work, right? And that would be these staking protocols. And you'd be able to actually show the value of it through Icosa. So, and we know that it works, right? Like, if you just keep feeding the monster, feeding the machine that gets people involved now, because people are impulsive and they want to be able to get into things now, well, then they can buy hacks. And they can make an HSI and they can put it right into the buyback function, and they can get a big old lump sum, and they can get to staking and capture a pool percentage that other people may not have right now. If they wanted to, they still have that advantage to do that, right? And feed this monster that is the auction, right? I mean, it's not a bad thing to do. I mean, the value that they get, may depend on the obvious where the ceiling price currently is. So they could just go buy Icosa, but I mean, they're testing the liquidity as well, right? If they go buy Icosa, then somebody else is just going to go make an HSI and then use the buyback function as soon as they cause that green candle to happen. Maybe extract value just because they know that when somebody comes and actually gets some extra yield and tests the liquidity to the downside, that they're going to get cheaper availability to increase their pool position on this asset as it's growing and taking advantage of that, right? And then eventually be like, how do some of these people have such high pool positions? Well, because they utilized the code because they knew how it worked. That's why. They didn't give up their positions of power to somebody else to pretty much take away their availability. You know what? Like, honestly, you would think that me as a competitor in this ecosystem that I call us all community members in, just, people who have the general knowledge of how this shit works is probably the best case scenario. That I would just be like, yeah, go suicide yourselves. Give away your shiny objects to this other fucking thing. Go for it. And then it's less competition for me in the end result, honestly. But I'm not going to behave that way. I'm not going to behave that way. Like, I would love to be able to have conversations years down the road with people who are the biggest holders of some of these assets, Hex, Hedron, and Icosa included, to continue to manage things the way that they intend on managing them, so it can continue to have these values that we talk about, right? Before, because of the code, it was like a penny would be fucking crazy, right? But because of the code, we realized that it has some sort of value that intrinsically has with the availability of your own ownership of being your own bank and making as many printers as you want. And when you get all the way up to the top of the staking profile of Icosa, you have a little bit more of a expensive mining equipment based off of the value of the underlying asset when it is staked into a protocol in the first place, right? So, like, to understand how all these assets do work together requires the participation of the community in the first place to have like their own individual bank with options. That's what it's all about. It's like to manage it like currency would be managed, but you have the individual availability with all these options to be the loan officer whenever you wanted. Or you could sell the printers off on the market to people who understand what they are, or people that see an advantage of being able to buy those when they were made a long time ago in comparison to what they would think is relevant to them. Like that would be a good way to market them when you were going to sell them on market in the first place, or to a friend of yours or to somebody else, right? Because it may take a little bit of that stuff too, where you as the individual are going to have to entrepreneurially put yourself in a situation to market some of these things, maybe, depending on how long you hold them.
I don't know. I mean, pretty soon, I think all you're going to have to do is just say Watsa.
Maybe. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, I'll be on tomorrow. I'm going to sleep. I'll talk to you guys
Night,
later.
man.
Good night, guys.
Damn.